Hello everyone, welcome into another stream of Last Protagonist reacting to videos. So I've got a bit of good news. I was able to get in contact with Elden Dork, and we have set up a stream to happen tomorrow where I kind of interview him, learn more about his position from the video of his that we watched the other day. So that'll pretty much be the majority of that stream. And well, I mean, it'll be the entirety of that stream really. And then the next day on Sunday? No, I think I said Monday. I need to double check. But anyway, I'll be starting my playthrough of the first Berserker Kazan. I've got a poll on the channel already determining whether or not I should use a greatsword or a spear based on the audience participation. So if you haven't seen that community post and you want to vote on that, please go ahead and do so at your leisure. So anyway, welcome back in, everybody. We have Iman, Astinex, Zyro, Chadwick Early, and Scowleasy and Elden Enthusiast. How's it going? So, Elden said, who else gets to apply to job interviews with me? I mean, I have considered potentially having more guests on the show and just like shooting the poop about lore and stuff. But I just haven't gotten around to it. I don't know. I don't know if I'm like the best person for it, but I guess you don't need technically the best person to do it. I just don't know if too many people would be willing, I guess. So anyway, welcome back in. So yesterday we finished watching Theo T. Tree's Shadow the Erd Tree critique, which was very thought-provoking, and I enjoyed that quite a bit with you guys. Today we will be checking out Occam's Onion, The Collapse of the Sun Realm. Eclipse is the advent of gloam. The fled god was her all along. So if you couldn't tell just from like the general trend of videos that I watch, this is a topic that interests me quite a bit. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I've got a lot of thoughts that I've been stewing on. The issue is that none of them are ever truly conclusive, but maybe this will provoke me into sharing some of the details with y'all. So Methoda, nice to see you again. Earthmind, Chadwick, and Stella, welcome back in. Okay, so let's go ahead and check out The Collapse of the Sun Realm. Eclipse is the advent of gloam. The fled god was her all along.
Oh.
There's something about the Eclipse Sun of Castle Sol that just doesn't really add up. Inside the Church of Eclipse of Castle Sol, a spirit can be seen praying. It asks the frigid Sun of Sol to surrender itself to the eclipse and grants life to the soulless bones. Yet, just what is this frigid Sun of Sol? In front of the altar of this church, there is a burnt corpse from which we can acquire the Eclipse Hotel, the storied sword and treasure of Castle Sol. The shape of the sword is fashioned after an eclipse sun drained of color, and its description also mentions a vivid sighting of an eclipse sun, specifically one that was seen in Sol. Therefore, would this eclipse sun mentioned here be the frigid Sun of Sol? And is Sol here referring to Castle Sol? Well, apparently, no. You see, while Castle Sol had attempted to trigger an eclipse for a specific reason, the eclipse did not really happen for them. As according to another spirit, the sun has not been swallowed, their prayers were lacking, and that Miquella's comrade remained soulless. Judging by the dialogues, the eclipse sun apparently did not occur. However, as we have mentioned, the Eclipse Hotel clearly describes a vivid sighting of an eclipse sun drained of color. Therefore, the important question to ask is, just when did this eclipse sun drained of color happen? And if it did not happen for Castle Sol, then is the soul mentioned in the description really Castle Sol? Quite a pickle, isn't it? Yet, a new item from the DLC might just be able to give us a hint. Or rather, the final missing piece of the puzzle that is the frigid Sun of Sol, the eclipse sun drained of color. The description of the rock heart reads, heart consumed in the ancient original form of dragon communion. The last thing the partaker saw with human eyes was a sunset. Its colors faded and tarnished, a remote thing from eternity.
So we've talked about the rock art description quite a bit the past couple weeks. I'm of the opinion that this is more of a personal thing, and it's not as though the sunset itself was literally drained of color to passive observers. My take on this is that after he performed communion, he kind of transcended humanity, and thus like the vividness of reality kind of started to fade for him, almost like how Godfrey became tarnished. I almost said faded after defeating his last worthy foe. And maybe the same thing could be true here. Actually, that'd be an interesting idea if the reason. Well, I don't think it really works. But anyway, I was going to say it'd be interesting if the reason Godfrey and then became tarnished is because he ate the heart of a dragon, and whether or not that dragon was the Stormlord, just his last worthy enemy, that much is debatable. But anyway, Mathota said whoever designed the Soul Shotel, the Eclipse, whatever it is, gets an A+. Stella wants one.
So, this Dragon Communion partaker witnessed a sunset whose colors faded and tarnished. Meanwhile, the Eclipse Sun of Soul is also described as lusterless and drained of color. So, what if I tell you the partaker was witnessing an eclipse happening to the setting sun, causing his color to fade and tarnish, just like
And so, one of the differences with the Japanese text, and this is like really, I don't want to say like negligible, but the term used for sunset kind of means it in, maybe it's not the term itself, I need to double check. The way that they talk about the sunset doesn't necessarily just mean the sun specifically. It means all of the colors in like the scene, essentially. The setting was faded and tarnished, essentially. So that is another reason why I don't necessarily ascribe to this theory so far.
happening to the setting sun, causing his color to fade and tarnish, just like the lusterless eclipse sun of Soul. Or rather, what if I tell you this eclipse sunset is in fact the very same one depicted by the Eclipse Shotel, and the same one that Castle Soul attempted to trigger once more for their soulless demigods. And this eclipse sun happened in the ancient era, when Dragon Communion was still in its original form, where the rock hearts of the traitorous allies of Baal were first consumed, but not the mortal fleshy hearts of the drakes who only emerged later as the bloodline of Baal. But of course, this doesn't conclusively tell us when exactly this eclipse happened. Yet, it does tell us that the eclipse sun happened in ancient time, and is connected to the ancient dragons. And this would not be the only instance that hints at the son of the ancient dragons. Indeed, in the prehistoric era when there was no Earth Tree, the ancient dragons, with Placidusax as Elden Lord, also ruled the lands between under the Elden Ring. And they had a sun that was an equivalent to our Earth Tree, a golden sun that should have been eternal until an eclipse of catastrophic consequences was treacherously created, leading to the collapse of their Elden Ring cycle. A both-thesis statement it is, but I promise you, as we slowly unravel all the relevant or seemingly irrelevant mysteries, the stars will gradually align. In this
But yeah, so I pulled up the rock art description, and it's actually even more the case in Japanese than I remembered. Where's the zoom? Okay, here it is. So when you have the rock art, it says the last thing the partaker saw with human eyes was a sunset. Hold on. Was a sunset, its colors faded and tarnished, a remote thing from eternity. So when you have the reflexive pronoun it's used to refer back to the sunset, that makes it sound like it could just refer directly to the sun, which is totally understandable why Occam's onion would have come to this interpretation. But the term here, it's like the view, like the setting of the view that they were looking at within the midst of the sunset, blah blah blah. However, everything became faded. So it's like Subete is very clearly like everything. It's not just the sun. And of course, maybe you could make the argument that the sun being eclipsed caused everything else to become tarnished and faded, but I don't know. I feel like that's kind of different from what the Eclipse Hotel is talking about and stuff like that. But you guys may feel differently, but at least I could give you some extra context for that. Hey, True Connoisseur, welcome back in. So you missed Occam's onion suggesting that because the rock heart talks about a lusterless sun, essentially, that it must pertain to the eclipse, which may be tied to the eclipse of the Eclipse Hotel. Elden said, with themes of desire around dragon communion, you interpret the rock heart as those chasing the gold within dragon hearts, but whatever they see is fleeting compared to something eternal, and the fleeting is representative of the sunset. I think that's a pretty interesting thematic read of it. I could buy into that for sure.
In this video, we will be deep diving into the Elden Ring cycle of the Ancient Dragons, and I will paint you a picture so clear that we will be able to unravel the mystery of the Sun Realm, the lusterless eclipse sun of Soul, the full picture of the high treason committed by the Nox, the origin of the Duskborn, the wandering mausoleums and those who live in death, the secret and treasonous motive of the god that was fled, and finally, the identity of the cadaver shown in the trailer. By the end of this video, you will see the uncanny parallels between the collapse of the last cycle and the collapse of our own, almost as if history is repeating itself. But for us to see this picture, we
It is all a cycle. Brandish the Elden Ring. What description is that? All a cycle? I think it's the Memory of Grace. Yeah, Memory of Grace. It is merely a cycle. Stand before the Elden Ring. Become the Elden Lord. What am I doing?
must first talk about the son of the Ancient Dragons. And the first clue to this revelation also lies in Castle Soul, a place that is for a reason we will soon know closely associated with the Eclipse Sun. A stronghold occupied by specters of banished knights and exiled soldiers led by Commander Nile. Interestingly, at the rooftop of Castle Soul guarded by Commander Nile, there is this mosaic whose pattern resembles the sun. And as you all may have already known, the word soul in his name also means sun in Latin. So Castle Soul is essentially the castle of the sun. With this being the case, of course there would be a mosaic depicting the sun in the castle of the sun. Yet, this mosaic, you see, is not really exclusive to Castle Soul, and can also be seen on the two bridges leading to Bastille's Sanctum, and therefore, naturally, in Farum Azula as well.
Oh yeah, I don't remember welcoming Hilko back in, but in case I didn't, welcome back in.
This mosaic can actually be quite ambiguous in what it's depicting, had we first found it in Farum Azula, among its various other mosaics and reliefs. But knowing its presence in Castle Soul and the implied significance, we can therefore safely assume that it is indeed a mosaic of the sun.
Although I more or less agree with this, I would be willing to listen to somebody else who tried to make the argument that this is a flower instead. But if they wanted to go so far to say it's a sunflower, I wouldn't really push back against that too much either. Hey, Jan Jarvis, welcome back in.
Yet, this would not be the only thing that depicts the sun in Farum Azula. You see, strangely, Farum Azula has a presence of those who live in death, and the presence of Deathroot's growth. And some of the skeletal beastmen can be seen holding a shield that also depicts the sun. Or rather, a city crowned by the sun. Sunrealm Shield, Shield of Honor depicting a city crowned by the sun. It has seen better days. Much like the wear upon the shield, the seat of the sun is long faded away. So, the skeletal beastmen of this ancient royal city of the Ancient Dragons hold the Sunrealm Shield, whose description mentions a city crowned by the sun, and a seat of the sun as well. Meanwhile, the shield is called Sunrealm Shield, which implies the existence of a sun realm. So, the question to ask here is, just what or where is this sun realm? Other than the beastmen of Farum Azula, the Sunrealm Shields are also held by skeletal knights, found in some of the grave sites. And aside from their shields, these skeletal knights also wear a red cape that has a symbol of the sun. What's even more interesting is that the grave sites of these skeletal knights scatter across multiple regions of the lands between, such as Limgrave, Caelid, Mountaintops of the Giants, and even Altus Plateau. So, what do all these imply? Well, it is no mere coincidence that the Sunrealm shields held by the skeletal beastmen of Farum Azula are also held by the skeletal knights, whose grave sites are in most regions of the lands between. especially when we
It's kind of interesting that we also have, I don't remember if they actually have the Sunrealm shield, but there's definitely some those who live in death amongst these kind that are in the Shadow Realm over by the Shadow Keep, going to Manus Metter, essentially. It's like right next to the gate almost. Elden Enthusiast is asking, is there any good reason the Beastmen have messed up looking mouths? You don't know if it's fair to compare them to Misbegotten mouths. I don't know if I'd compare to them to the Misbegotten mouths, because at the very least, Misbegotten teeth are flat as though they're herbivores, whereas like the Beastman is pointed. But probably just looks cool would be my guess. And then Hilko asks, is the Sunrealm on the bingo card? Let's actually pull that back up. Oh, I should use Paint 3D, of course. I don't think I have the Sunrealm specifically on here. Anyway, let's see what we've got so far. Not quite archaeology yet. Well, he did bring up the Gek already, so that's the free spot. Whoops. Let's make this a bingo color. The Gek. We're dangerously close to America is already. Color theory, I'm going to bring this up because he talked about the sun being drained of color, so I think that works. Rorschach style imagery. I think I'm gonna say that the sun depiction / flower depiction in Fair Missoula will account for that. Methoda says, what's the Japanese says in reference to? If anybody ever brings up a Japanese comparison, and like anything in the video itself, not me like doing the meta commentary about it. Okay, I think this is good so far.
we consider that the ancient dragons once ruled the lands between in the prehistoric era. Indeed, the lands between was once called the Sun Realm in the last Elden Ring cycle of the ancient dragons, and that is why even in the realm of shadow of the Hornsands, there are also skeletal beastmen that hold the Sun Realm shield.
Cool, I forgot that the dudes over in Jagged Peak have these as well, so that's quite nice.
Which is only natural as the Sun Realm of the prehistoric era most definitely predates the civilization of the Hornsands. And no, the Hornsands do not belong to the era of the Sun Realm. While their roots or ancestors had certainly existed back then, the Hornsand civilization we now see, together with their Anir Ilim and Ballarat, only emerged ages, if not millennia, after the collapse of the Sun Realm. And we will soon get to know why this is most likely the case. But for now, as the Sun Realm shield also exists in the land of the Hornsands, it does confirm that the realm of shadow was indeed once part of the lands between. Yet, if the lands between was once the Sun Realm, then what or where is this city crowned by the sun? Well, could it be Farum Azula, the ancient royal city of the ancient dragons? After all, the seat of the Elden Lord himself is at the center of the city, which would make Farum Azula metaphorically fit the phrase crowned by the sun. And this city does have an obscured sun that would, strangely, never set. Judging by its position, one can say it's just a few hours away from sunset, almost as if the sun is being prevented from setting, to avoid the coming of sunset and more. Well, we'll get back to this shortly, but for now, you see, for unknown reason, the ancient royal city has been slowly crumbling since time immemorial, and ruins of the city have fallen from the sky. But strangely, instead of falling into the sea below, a lot of its ruins are also present in places far away from Farum Azula, such as Limgrave, Caelid, Whipping Peninsula, and Liurnia of the Lakes. So, how did all the ruins of Farum Azula come to scatter so far from where the city is? Well, the answer most likely is that they are not the ruins of Farum Azula. Instead,
Ooh, that's a bold claim, Cotton. I wonder how that one's gonna work out, because they certainly share a lot of the same architectural reliefs as Farum Azula itself.
These ruins were originally cities and temples that floated above the regions they have now fallen into. Indeed, Farum Azula is not the only sky city of the ancient dragons. Before the collapse of their cycle, there were once other sky cities and temples above the various regions we have mentioned, and more importantly,
I would like either textual support for this, which does not exist, or some more qualifiers, like I think, because when you say it like this, it sounds too confident, and people might just take it at face value when there isn't anything outright confirming this as far as I'm aware. Anyway, Mao, welcome back into the stream. How you doing tonight?
they were temples and sanctuaries that once bathed in the rays of the golden sun, and were capable of shining light themselves. Around these fallen ruins, two types of stone fragments can be found. They are rune fragments and sanctuary stones, with sanctuary stones being the rarer ones of the two. And interestingly, both stones have the property of light to them. The rune fragments are said to glow with a faint light from within, while sanctuary stones are capable of feeding light and strengthening it as it shines. So, what do these stones tell us about the structure they had been once part of before they crumbled and fell from the sky? Correct. As I said, they were sky temples and sanctuaries that glowed. Yet, the sanctuaries in particular would also absorb light from the sun and intensify it for the civilizations on the surface. And why intensify it, you ask? You see, sanctuary stones is a crafting ingredient for both warming stone and frenzy flamestone. Both are consumables that use FP to generate warmth for a healing effect. And indeed, as the description of the warming stone mentions, the earth tree was once as warm as the gentle sun and would gradually heal all who bathe in its rays. Similarly, we can imagine back in the era of the ancient dragons before the earth tree, the sun they worshipped together with their shining sanctuaries in the sky also had a similar effect, spreading its warmth and blessing to the civilizations on the surface, who the ancient dragons also ruled. But you see, coincidentally, we have one ancient civilization that, for some reason, has an aversion to light.
Well, they're underground now, so that could be part of it. But anyway, Hilko was saying you wish, or you want to believe in the Sky Cities, but you wish we could have seen more examples of them throughout the game. You guess we have floating elevators, and of course we'll always have Bloodborne. It's true that we do kind of have floating elevators, but we don't really have any go off into the sky, so much that I can recall. And I guess it's kind of funny that the lifts of Rao and, not Rao, oh my goodness, the lifts of Rold and Dectus don't float like the Nox, well, elevator lifts, I guess.
The civilization that is the Nox of the Eternal City. Interestingly, the clerics and sorceresses of the Nox had a convention to hide their eyes. As the description of the Night Maiden Twin Crown reads, twin crowns worn by the Night Maidens of the Eternal City, indicates the highest clerical rank and hides the eye with silk. Or, as the Nox Sorceress Crown reads, crown worn by sorceresses of the Eternal City. These women are the personal guards of the Night Maidens, and the silk hides their eyes. The altered version of the crown would even add, the silk eye covering is removed, flaunting convention. So it is apparently of convention for these clerics and sorceresses to hide their eyes. But why? Well, have you noticed there is something special about the building of the Eternal City? They all have windows that are made of metal instead of glass, and unlike glass, metal is a material that light cannot get through. Indeed, it is the light that the Nox are hiding their eyes from. In fact, the Nox shun light so much that not only do they have a convention of covering their eyes, but even their buildings are also impenetrable by light.
Well, I like the idea of these observations. I don't think it's quite so ironclad as that, because we also have other characters completely unaffiliated with the Nox who cover their eyes, not necessarily to block out the light, but for perhaps religious reasons, like Corin and arguably Goldmask as well to a degree. So, with a bunch of ties being granted to things like fate and light. I could imagine that blinding themselves to light might also try to give them the opportunity to see prophecies or things like that as well. So, Elmo, welcome back in. You said maybe Fair Missoula traveled around the land. That is definitely a thought that some people have had. I don't really have strong feelings about it, but I also admit that it's really weird in how many places the crumbling ruins of Fair Missoula or its little temples seem to be. Chadwick said, do we quasi respect the idea that Nox called down Estelle by accident, sinking the Eternal City, and at the same time jettisoning Fair Missoula? Me personally, no, because Estelle seems to be a byproduct of their despair, and I believe the reason that they'd be despairing for Estelle to show up would be when they're already banished. But I don't believe the vast majority of people believe that, partially because of the localization. Elden, you wish we could have fought anyone in charge of the Nox, or even the CEO of the Nox herself. The closest you could get is to just not doing Ronnie's quest line, unfortunately. That's a joke. I don't really know if she's truly Nox affiliated, despite everything. I mean, she's affiliated, but not like the head honcho, because she's essentially getting hunted down by the Black Knives, right? True Connoisseur says the mirror helm may reinforce this narrative a bit, though, that mirrors reflect light. That is true, and I definitely agree with that to an extent, but I'm just saying that there are multiple reasons why they could have covered their eyes, and if they were truly worried about the light, then it's kind of ironic that we don't find any of the Nox underground who go so far as to actively wear the mirror helms themselves. Hey, Potato Poker, how's it going? Nice to see you again. Okay.
So, just what exactly is this like that the Nox are so averse to? The Nox Mirror Helm have just the answer. The Mirror Helm is a ritual implement capable of warding off the intervention of the Greater Will and its vassal fingers, and is made of crystal-looking glass, a material that can conceivably block off or deflect light. Indeed, the Greater Will and its vassal fingers exert their influence through light. But it is not just any light. It is the light of the sun that the Nox is hiding from. It was the sun of the Sun Realm, the golden sun of the ancient dragons and their Elden Ring, an earthly equivalent of their cycle. And aside from sunlight, they were also hiding from the light of the shining sky temples that existed in their era. The temples.
So this may not really be that relevant, but just to give you guys that context, we have our most ubiquitous Japanese phrase stuck at the end of all of the Mirror Helm descriptions, our Toyu, which essentially is saying that it's like they say that it's said to ward away all manners of what do you want to call it? Like influence? That's probably not the right way to describe it, but anyway. True Connoisseur called it. Okay. Emma asks, is this the inspiration for Ghibli's Castle in the Sky? Yeah, this one came out first. Let me back this up.
Earthly equivalents of their cycle. And aside from
I'm going to back it up a little bit more.
Light. But it is not just any light. It is the light of the sun that the Nox is hiding from. It was the sun of the Sun Realm, the golden sun of the ancient dragons and their Elden Ring, an earthly equivalent of their cycle. And aside from sunlight, they were also hiding from the light of the shining sky temples that existed in their era. The temples of the ancient dragons and their god. The god that was fled, who ruled with the Elden Ring in the name of the Greater Will. Oh, by the way, do you know that solar eclipse occurs when the moon comes between the sun and the earth? And when the sun is completely blocked by the moon, it is called a total solar eclipse, where the sun is entirely covered with only a glowing white halo appearing around the darkened moon, which looks just like the eclipse sun drained of color of soul, the symbol of the
I'm muted. Okay, so what was I saying? Right. So I do think that the design of the Great Eclipse shield, whatever it's called, is pretty evocative, and the way that it seems to be drained of color kind of resembles the stalk of the Erd tree. So I definitely understand why people think that there might be a causal relationship between this pattern and what would go on to become the Erd tree as well.
Like the eclipse sun drained of color, of soul, the symbol of the wandering mausoleum. That's right, it takes the moon to create a solar eclipse. Or rather, it takes the moon to create an eclipse sun drained of color. And the Nox just so happen to have a black moon that once hung above their eternal city to create a solar eclipse, especially when they worship this moon instead of the sun of the ancient dragons. Indeed, the eclipse sun drained of color was created by the Nox and their black moon in an attempt to overthrow the sun, the very cornerstone of the reign of the ancient dragons and their Elden Ring. The eclipse sun is also called the frigid sun of soul because the golden sun was swallowed by the cold black moon of the Nox, who is a cold-blooded.
And yeah, I don't know if this is factually true or not, but I do think that this is a good possibility. Pretty much, like the issue is, if this theory is wrong, then it becomes even more nebulous trying to piece together when the Nox committed their treason and how they did so. So that isn't to say that like this is the right and only correct possible interpretation here. It's just what else is there almost?
Race who lit candles with the cold ghost flame instead of fire. Indeed, the heat or warmth that comes with sunlight is also what they are averse to. It is said that the Nox have committed treason and invoked the ire of the Greater Will, with the blood-drenched finger slayer blade as proof. Yet, this is only part of the high treason they committed. What they also did was creating an eclipse of catastrophic consequences under the reign of the ancient dragons to the Golden Sun. In other words, they sabotaged and attempted to overthrow the reign that was in the name of the Greater Will. And this eclipse sun drained of color had two catastrophic effects to the Sun Realm and its Elden Ring order. Yet, to know what these effects are, we must first solve a conundrum of Farum Azula. The conundrum that is the presence of Deathroot's growth.
Hey, that's a fun one to solve. I'm glad he's bringing this up, to be honest. So, who all just joined again? So we had Pastor of Muppets, Platinum Chip back in, and Meow Laser. How's it going, guys? Meow Laser, your neighbor just walked by singing to himself again. It's kind of funny. When I was in school, there was this girl who would like walk around with her headphones in, singing to herself, and I don't think she really realized how ridiculous she looked doing it, because she wasn't a particularly good singer. I guess it's a little bit more forgivable if you're actually good at it and people enjoy it, but it just I don't know. Maybe it was more like she was doing it for attention or for somebody to recognize the song she's singing and hope she could make a friend. I don't know, but I felt kind of bad for her. Stella says maybe it's frigid because the temperature drops during a total eclipse. It sucks when you're outside in April and misjudge how the drop would be. Are you speaking from experience there? And that's a good idea as well, that if the sun does get eclipsed, of course, it is going to relatively be frigid compared to its normal state as well. Global, you guys had a guy that walked around playing bass. I don't know, at least like that's more forgivable because you could hear the song, whatever he's doing, but she was just singing with headphones on and not very well at all. But I could also see that being annoying. Yeah, Laser said he sucks. There's some major schizophrenia going on with him. Oh man, I hope the girl that I was talking about wasn't schizophrenic then. Platinum Chip had a neighbor who walked up and down the block yelling rap songs regularly. That's crazy. Hey Mothcrab, nice to see you again. You'd be fine with hearing the bass because it's really smooth, if they're good, maybe. And Captini, welcome back. You completely disagree with the singing take? Singing, storytelling, dancing, and stuff of that nature should not be skills to be good at. They're forms of communications which used to be normal. Well, the thing is, she's wearing headphones, so that kind of implicitly adds a barrier to trying to communicate with somebody if they literally cannot hear you. So I would disagree with your disagreement, sir. Yeah, I disagree. Elden said, and don't forget the headache of the Shaman Newman connection with all the snacks on stuff. Oh boy. You best believe we haven't forgotten all the complications. But so far, like, other than the framing of some things being a little bit too confident or concrete for my liking, I think the theorizing in general has been pretty solid so far. When Mothcrab went to high school, there was a one person who would walk around with bags in their hands. You wouldn't realize it was them, and then they suddenly start jazzercising with bags in their hands. I could forgive jazzercising a bit. Like, I mean, I don't know. Unless they're, like, super loud about it or something. I don't know. Anyway, let's go back in.
Death roots, according to its item description, is a source that give rise to those who live in death. And therefore, the presence of death roots growth in Farum Azula is likely the explanation behind the existence of skeletal beastmen. The real question, however, is how is death root growth possible in Farum Azula in the first place? According to death root's description, the stolen Rune of Death enabled the first death of a demigod. Later, the Rune of Death spread across the lands between through the underground roots of the Great Tree, sprouting in the form of a death root. In other words, death roots are the manifestation of the Rune of Death, and the reason they take the form of roots is because they were spread through roots of the Great Tree, causing them to also sprout in the form of roots. But you see, Farum Azula is a city in the sky that is not connected to any Great Tree. So where did all these death roots growth come from? Well, the most intuitive answer would be Geraint, who is also Malekith that has been collecting and devouring death roots. Since he is interestingly also in Farum Azula, the obvious answer would be him, who has somehow caused the growth of death roots here. And while Farum Azula is not connected to any great tree, there are plenty of visible roots sprawling around and through its structures. This also makes death roots possible to take form and sprout. Yet, this explanation has a few problems. First, if it really is Geraint that is causing the growth of death root in Farum Azula, then it would make sense that the death root would be growing in places around him.
I appreciate this line of thought as well.
Namely the Bestial Sanctum and his arena in Farum Azula. Especially in Bestial Sanctum, where he must have remained for quite some time. Yet, both places have no presence of death root at all. And you see, there is also another presence of death that Geraint as the answer can't really explain. The worm phase of Farum Azula, who are also afflicted with death. The reason I say they are afflicted with...
Isn't it cool how there's just these random things that have no explanation or even like not even a single line acknowledging their existence in the game? It's so wild. Almo asks if Geraint is projecting himself like Selen. It's a possibility. It's really weird that if you kill him in one spot, he stays dead for that location, though, unlike Blythe, who keeps popping back up again and again.
Death is because of their death mist attack that can cause death blight, and ailments that can lead to instant death. So, is their death affliction also caused by the death root growth in Farum Azula? Well, the thing is, Farum Azula is not the only place where we can find this worm face. Interestingly, on Aldous Plateau, outside of Leyndell, there are quite a number of these worm face as well. So, could their affliction also be caused by the death roots growth all the way in Farum Azula? But of course, death roots growth is not exclusive to Farum Azula and is also on the surface of the Lands Between as well. So instead, a different and better question to ask altogether would be just who are these worm face? And the answer lies with the item in their hands.
Elden enthusiasts saw someone speculate that the worm faces have similar clothes to the Erdtree Guardians. You just remembered that observation, but you never got around to checking. I think maybe Zoli had a video, or maybe it was Zlofsky who like showed off the worm faces tapestry, but I don't remember the specifics of it. Or maybe it was Square Table Gaming. Yeah, I think I watched that video, but it's been so long.
In ancient Japan or China, courtiers of the palace would hold a rectangular scepter of wood or ivory in hand when they are in the presence of the emperor, as a form of courtesy and respect. Other than courtiers, they would also be held by priests during religious ceremonies, and these scepters are called shaku in Japanese or hu in Chinese. And if you have played Sekiro before, you have already seen them in the hands of the old dragons of the tree. The scepter that is also held in the hands of these wormface. Indeed, the wormface are most likely the ancient courtiers or priests of the ancient dragons of the Sun Realm. So why are they also in Altus Plateau, you ask?
I feel like I've come across Shaku before, but I definitely did not remember this extent of it. So I don't know if it came up in the context of an Elden Ring game. I don't really recognize that kanji. Maybe it came up when I was looking up Shinto stuff. Okay.
Well, remember that the lands between was once the Sun Realm and the Skeletal Knight. Their grave sites can also be found within the outer walls of Lanedale as well. In fact, the Altus Bloom is a golden-tinged flower from a succulent plant that blooms on the Altus Plateau, and is said to be a funeral flower in an era long past, before the Erdtree grew.
And I think the Altus Bloom is supposed to be modeled off of a coxcomb. And Solosia Argentia? I don't know. I heard somewhere that it could be associated with fire. Looking at the not YouTube, the wiki right now. That's just the color. Anyway, I'll just show you the picture of the flower. I don't remember what source I was looking up for them the first time around. Okay, so I think that this does look remarkably similar to the Altus Bloom. I don't think it's like a one-to-one type thing, but I was pretty surprised to see it. And for what it's worth, if I remember correctly, the kanji for this is essentially like the equivalent of a rooster head, which is essentially what coxcomb is in English as well. So maybe there's a bird type connection to the flowers. I don't know. I doubt it.
Indeed, in an era long past that is of the prehistoric era, before the Erdtree grew, the Altus Plateau was already blessed with gold. The same gold of the ancient dragons who naturally also ruled Altus Plateau as their domain. And with this being the case, of course we can find the courtiers or priests.
Isn't it weird that we don't actually have any Altus flowers in the Skidoo Altus or anything quite like it? I don't really have super strong feelings about it one way or the other, but it would have been nice to connect like the Shadow Realm and Death stuff to the Altus Plateau with the Funereal Flower reference there.
Of the ancient dragons in Altus Plateau, which may in turn imply the same geopolitical significance these regions had even back in the era of the ancient dragons. And this is why Farum Azula is not the only candidate in being the city crowned by the sun, especially when the city is also described as a giant mausoleum in the sky for some reason. The second possible city is a city that once existed on the Altus Plateau along with the golden tinged Altus blooms. Both were blessed by the golden rays of the sun. The city of an ancient civilization that has long been banished underground. The city that Leyndell now sits on top of. The nameless eternal city of the Nox.
Hey Robbie, nice to see you again. What'd you put on your wish list then?
Speaking of which, according to the Eclipse Crest Heater Shield, the sun in Eclipse is said to be the symbol of the Wandering Mausoleum, where the soulless demigods slumber. And the Wandering Mausoleums are clearly structures of the Nox. Indeed, other than the Black Moon, death is also an aspect that can be forgettable of the Nox, which is evident in their use.
What? It can be forgettable of the Nox? What?
An aspect that can be forgettable of the Nox, which
Does anybody understand what he means by that? I'm going to back it up a little bit further.
Nox. Indeed, other than the Black Moon, death is also an aspect that can be forgettable of the Nox,
Okay,
which is evident
I
in
see.
their use of the Ghost Flame.
Death is an aspect which is easily forgotten. Okay.
Of the Deathbirds. Yet, I'm not saying the Deathbirds or their mother, the Twin Bird, are behind the death affliction of the Wormface or the Deathroots Grove present in Farum Azula. It is merely a clue to the right direction. And after all, Deathroots Grove is a manifestation of the Rune of Death. But the thing is, you see, the Nox might just have the Rune of Death at 10 together with their Black Moon to create an eclipse sun of death. The Black Knives of the Black Knife Assassins have a very peculiar shape and are imbued with the power of the stolen Rune of Death. According to Roger, the Black Knife Assassins are all descendants of the Eternal City, the descendants of the Nox. And if this is true, then of course their Black Knives would fashion after the shape of their hidden treasure, the Finger Slayer Blade. Although the Black Knives do have an extra edge in the middle of the blade, the overall shape and curves of the two are identical. Even if you don't really see it, what actually matters is, just like the Black Knife has left behind a curse mark of death on both Godwyn and Ranni, the Finger Slayer Blade also left a visible curse mark of death on the two fingers slayed by Ranni, and interestingly, also have a curse mark as well.
You know what I never really thought of? If her two fingers... I guess it's the Finger Slayer Blade which kills it, not like the Black Knives. But it still does have the same curse mark of death, which is a half one, not like a full brand. So was this two fingers only killed halfway through? Is it still alive and its soul was killed? Do two fingers have souls? Was that Ranni's plan? Kill the soul of the two fingers, but keep its power for herself? Somehow? Or vice versa? Let its body die and she absorbs its soul? I don't know, man. This is weird. Mothcrab asks, aren't the two fingers just misguided aliens? Hey, look, they are naturalized citizens. Their mom had them as anchor babies completely legally, all right? True Connoisseur went into this video very skeptical because a lot of the Sunlords stuff is really tinfoil, but there are pretty good observations in this one. Yeah, so like a lot of this stuff is things that I've considered as well, and man, it's really tough trying to make a sensible timeline of things, but I feel like I'm just gonna have to bite the bullet and make some logical educated leaps, I guess. Elmo said the Finger Keeper had spirit ashes, so maybe. Oh, that's true. The DLC does give us one now. Yeah, I guess they do have souls. Okay.
irony, and interestingly, also have a curse mark as well. So, does it mean that the Finger Slayer blade was long ago also imbued with the rune of death?
I don't know why I didn't really think about it that way. I mean, I kind of did because I mentioned the possibility that the Gek could be the sword in my video about that. Like all of this just sucks with the timeline tie-ins to so many disparate parts of the game and its lore, though. Like I am fine if the gloam-eyed queen gets offed early on, but trying to identify her and fit her in with like the horn scent or the dragons is really awkward because other than the Godskin duo in Farum Azula, there's virtually nothing to suggest that and whatnot. But it's really coming down to a case of how do you call it? I can't think of how to articulate this, so I'm just going to settle for saying like picking your poison at this point, where if you think the Gek was slain late in the timeline, that's fine, but the earlier you place her, the more difficult it becomes because she has a direct causal connection between Marika removing the rune of death from the Elden Ring, or so it seems. Or maybe not, I guess. I guess it might just depend on whether or not you think the gloam-eyed queen relied on the rune of death's power, and she didn't have control of it herself. But I don't know, man. Chadwick said maybe they aren't the same timeline. Maybe we exist in a convergence. Maybe time is convoluted after all, as we'll learn in like June when we get that content patch with the Mirage set. Iman says the DLC is not canon as far as the timeline goes, or basically that's a big mess. I would have to disagree. Like I feel like we need to take the DLC as being canon because there's nothing in the DLC which directly contradicts what we get in the base game. There just might be too many missing links to say anything definitively, which would be the problem. Elden asks, would it have been her great rune that was still in the ring? Potentially, yes. Or I wouldn't call it a great rune. You might be able to call it an Elden rune, the same way that Marika and Radagon have Elden runes. But I don't know. True Connoisseur said, message retracted. Okay.
Well, the Finger Slayer blade is said to have been born of a corpse, just like the sacred Radic sword that is born of the corpse of Marika or Radagon, the corpse of a god. Although we don't know if it is also the corpse of a god in the case of the Finger Slayer blade, the blade
Hold on, I was not paying close enough attention to that, to be honest. I'm going to back that
Finger
up.
Slayer blade is said to have been born of a corpse, just like the sacred Radic sword that is born of the corpse of Marika or Radagon, the corpse of a god. Although we don't know if it is also the corpse of a god in the case of the Finger Slayer blade, the blade is said to be able to harm the Greater Will and its vessels. While the parts on harming the Greater Will could be an exaggeration, yet the Finger Slayer blade is indeed an item that Ranni specifically searched for and needed to slay her two fingers. While it is uncertain whether the corpse-born nature of the blade matters, the blade is still essential in the killing of its two fingers. Just like the rune of death is needed to kill a demigod, who are arguably also vassals of the Greater Will. So what do all these really imply? Now, both daggers
Captini asked, could the Finger Slayer blade be made from the lord the Nox tried to create? It is possible, and one thing that I've wondered is whether the Fry Boys in the Noxlands are essentially the Nox equivalent of whatever kind of ritual was conducted at the Divine Towers, and whether or not that's more or less to create a lord rather than something else, I guess. But I don't know, man. Elden asks, could we define great runes as shattered fragments of the ring and Elden runes if they're in the ring? I don't know if like it's an in-group, out-group type thing. All I can tell you is that for whatever reason, Marika and Radagon's sword and scar seals dignify them as being Elden runes, whereas the great runes are just called great runes for whatever reason. But yeah, I don't know. Like, if you think about the Great Runes as being objects which exist outside of the Elden Ring, theoretically, do they map onto like the depiction of the Elden Ring that's literally within Radagon slash Marika's body, or have the Great Runes truly been removed from it and are completely separate from whatever manifestation of the Elden Ring remains within the hollowed out husk of a being, which is Radika? Scaleezy thinks the Elden runes are runes belonging to a god slash Elden Lord. It does seem plausible, at the very least.
So, what do all these really imply? Now, both daggers trace their origin to the Nox. Both have the same specific shape and the same special property to harm vessels of the greater will. And most importantly, both leave on its victims half a curse mark of death. With these parallels established, the Finger Slayer blade is most likely, at the very least, also imbued with the Rune of Death. And we will get to why it also left half a curse mark in a bit. But this brings us back to the original topic that the Nox might just have the Rune of Death at hand to create an Eclipse Sun of Death.
So while I really like that whole idea about the two fingers being imbued with the Rune of Death, one thing that bothers me about the whole rune aspect of Elden Ring in general is that essentially aren't runes just letters? So what's potentially stopping Ranni from carving in the letter D for death that looks like a centipede in this world, rather than like stabbing the two fingers and then this curse mark just appearing? So for what it's worth, I don't necessarily think that idea works entirely either, because Ranni had to imbue the black knives with the Rune of Death as well, and she needed to steal a literal fragment of it. So I don't think it's quite so reductive as like typing in the letter D for death and it working, or ROD for Rune of Death and it working. So I'm being a little bit facetious here, but I still do wonder about this observation as well. So there's a decent amount of credence behind it, to be fair.
But this brings us back to the original topic that the Nox might just have the Rune of Death at hand to create an Eclipse Sun of Death.
True Connoisseur asks, could Ranni have imbued the Fingerslayer blade with what remained of the fragments of the Rune of Death? Maybe, but we don't even know if she still has a fragment of the Rune of Death. Arguably not, because she discarded her body, so why would she still hold on to the rune? But it's a fair enough question, I suppose.
You see, it's apparent by now that the Eclipse shall tell whether in its appearance or item description is a depiction of the eclipse that occurred to the son of the ancient dragons. Meanwhile, its weapon skill is called Death Flare, with a description that reads, set the lustreless sun ablaze with the Prince of Death's flame, inflicting the death element upon foes. So, what if I tell you the weapon skill itself is also a depiction of the eclipse, specifically the death flare it unleashed upon the land and its order? After all, the eclipse sun drained of color is said to have inspired a dreadful awe.
So I don't know about this, because the Prince of Death is canonically Godwyn. And so my question would be, what use would the Eclipse Hotel be when Godwyn was still alive? Was this crafted after Godwyn's death? I could potentially see that, but if Godwyn was alive, his flames wouldn't be death flames for all we know. So would the Eclipse Hotel be a Hotel of life fires instead? I don't know.
But here is also where things get interesting. You must have noticed that in the description, it was the Prince of Death's flame that set the lusterless sun ablaze. Now, the only Prince of Deaths that we know of is Godwin the
Oh no, guys, he's reading me like an open book.
Golden, the first soulless demigod. Yet, as we have mentioned, Castle Sol has failed to summon the Eclipse, confirming the Eclipse did not happen in our era. So, what does Godwin of our era have to do with this Eclipse of the prehistoric era? Well, have you...
To be fair, there is a huge gap between post Night of the Black Knives and pre-Night of the Black Knives, so there could have been an eclipse any time before that as far as we know, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the prehistoric era.
You ever wondered just why are the soulless demigods of the Golden Order being laid to rest in the mausoleums of the Nox? Could they have been built by the followers of the soulless demigods? Well, if so, why build them as a Nox structure instead of that of the Golden Orders? Yeah, no, they couldn't have been built by the followers, nor could they have been built in our era. Instead, these mausoleums were built by the Nox themselves in the prehistoric era. And it gets even more puzzling when you consider that the Nox have just the right tools for the unique situations of our soulless demigods who were killed in soul but not flesh. Almost as if they were created back then in the ancient era for the exact same purpose. Indeed, just like how the downfall of our cycle was begun with the release and spreading of the Rune of Death and the killing of demigods, the downfall of the last cycle also started in the same fashion. The use of the Finger Slayer Blade, the killing of demigods, and an eclipse sun that spread death. Remember the parallels between the Black...
I would say that the eclipse sun should not spread death. It should be the other way around, that it protected those from destined death. And so this could set up the Nox as being adversarial to the gloam-eyed queen, which, if that's the case, really brings up questions about the Finger Slayer Blade. But if you also consider that the Finger Slayer Blade is supposed to be a symbol of the Nox's high treason, then they could have potentially killed the Gek with Malekith somehow, and then kept her corpse as their prized treasure because they essentially killed God. And I don't know why. Well, anyway, I'll just leave that alone for now. So you guys wanted to check out the bingo card again? I don't believe Wandering Mausoleum is on the bingo card. Don't see anything else that totally fits just yet. Okay.
Knives and the Finger Slayer Blade. So what if I tell you the Prince of Death's flame is not of Godwin, but of another Prince of Death from the last Elden Ring cycle, a golden Prince of the Sun Realm, a direct offspring of the Dragon Lord and the god that was fled. Now, we will continue on this when we get to the god that was fled, and I promise you by then it will all make sense.
Hey guys, I'm going to mark this off as demigod parentage, because I think that kind of counts, to be honest. Just in a bit of a different direction than I anticipated when I first made that square for bingo. Captini said, in search of the gloam-eyed queen, you've forgotten even why she was important? Because of the connection between her and the Rune of Death, and therefore the creation of the Golden Order. It's a pretty big deal.
But for now, you see, the parallels don't just stop here. Because other than the spreading of the Rune of Death in the Order and the Realm, the Eclipse also tarnished the sun. But isn't this obvious by now, you ask? Well, indeed, but the thing is, the tarnishing of the sun itself also had a catastrophic consequence on the Sun Realm. Because it was no mere color, but instead the gold of the sun that was drained of and tarnished by the eclipse. And in fact, the golden sun was not the only thing that was tarnished. The smithing stones of the prehistoric era also lost their color. Somber smithing stones are used to strengthen special armaments with unique characteristics that cannot be strengthened with the color smithing stones. This tells us that Somber smithing stones somehow have some special or even superior qualities to them compared to their colored counterparts. Yet somehow they are all drained of colors. By the way, have you ever wondered why there are 10 tiers of Somber stones when the colored ones only have 9? You see, the description of the Somber stones and the colored ones actually correspond at different tiers. The first 2 tiers of both Somber and colored stones are shards. The third and the fourth of both are hard stones, while the 7th and 8th are stones both found in polar region. And finally, the last tiers of both are scales of the ancient dragon lord Placidusax. However, there's an extra tiers of Somber stone that the colored ones can really correspond to. The 9th tier, an ancient smithing stone that is drained of color. And have you noticed I did not mention the 5th and the 6th tier? Well,
I did, actually.
because they don't really correspond to each other. The colored stones of these 2 tiers only have a tinge of gold, while the Somber ones are exactly gold smithing stones. Indeed, the Somber stones are more special or superior to the colored ones because of their antiquity. They are stones from the prehistoric era blessed by the golden rays of the sun under the Elden Ring, with 2 tiers of them developed into or covered with gold. But when the golden sun of the ancient dragons was literally drained of color and tarnished by the eclipse of the Nox, these smithing stones were also drained of color. In other words, drained of its blessing of gold and became somber smithing stones. And yes, the eclipse caused the sun to fade and tarnish in colors, much like the eyes of the tarnished who have been stripped of the grace of gold.
I think this is a neat idea. I think it's pretty hard to reconcile Placidusax being directly affected by the eclipse, though, especially with the DLC edition of like Bale and mortally wounding him to begin with. So if you could reconcile that, that'd be great. Although I'm pretty skeptical he'll be able to do it, but I'd be pleasantly surprised to be proven wrong here. So Mike Bailey, nice to see you again.
As I said, the sun was an earthly equivalent to the sun realm. Under the Elden Ring, the golden sun ray, together with the shining temples in the sky, no doubt showered the land and its beings with grace and blessing. And this is why the eclipse was so catastrophic to the sun realm. As for them, it was not the eyes of the warriors that was tarnished, but the golden sun that is essentially our Earth Tree. However, this is where things get a little bit more complicated but also interesting. You see, if the eclipse really drained the realm of its grace of gold, how come the ancient dragons still have gold on their bodies? Specifically on the underside of their wings. Meanwhile, the grace of gold is arguably still present in their eyes as well. Well, a possible explanation is a matter of exposure to this eclipse sun. As in Farum Azula, some vegetations, but not all, are also drained of colors. In Farum Azula, there are some vegetations that, while don't seem to be withering, strangely do not have any colors. They are most concentrated in a floating structure next to an area with plenty of wilted trees. Meanwhile, the floating structure also has the presence of deathroot growth. More importantly, however, is that both places are directly exposed to the obscured sun seen in Farum Azula.
I think that's a neat idea, but it could also be that the trees are receiving too much light. So I don't know if I'd equate that to the eclipse itself. And I would really love the idea more if the leaves of the bushes that were in the shadows earlier were also brown. Although there are some differences between locations. Let me see. Tree. Are these screenshots? So yeah, these ones are all in the sun, but it has the reddish brown color at the top, which arguably should receive more sunlight than the ones below unless they're above the sun, I guess. So, well, I really like that idea. I don't think it works out as well as I'd like. Chat will be impressed to learn I run all this off of floppy disks. They would.
Meanwhile, another area that is also exposed to this obscured sun is one with quite a number of skeletal beastmen roaming about, with some of them hanging on trees. While the trees are not completely wilted like those from the previous area, interestingly, specifically the branches that these beastmen are hung onto have also wilted. Correct, it was the death of the skeletal beastmen that has caused the branches to wilt and die. However, consider this. The wilted trees from the first area we mentioned do not have any skeletal beastmen hanging on them. Meanwhile, the floating structure...
I also think it is weird that the skeletal beastmen are those who live in death because they should have been infected by deathroot, but I mean, they're literally hanging from a noose by a tree, which is not connected to roots by any stretch of the eye at all, so... Explain me that, lore guy. True Connoisseur assumed the fading has to do with the time stasis effects more than anything. Maybe. I don't remember if we have any faded effects on the side of Fair Missoula with the worm faces. I'm pretty sure we don't. So that might be food for thought as well. But I guess
next to it.
But I guess we have the worm faces themselves with death roots. I don't know how fair that is. Yeah, I guess, what's to say that it's just not the effect of Deathroot rather than the sun itself? Because Deathroot has a causal connection to Godwin, who has the lusterless flames associated with the Eclipse Hotel, so maybe he'll try to make the connection that way.
It have both Deathroot's growth and vegetations that are faded in colors. And what do these two areas have in common again? Yes, they are both directly exposed to the now obscured sun. Indeed, the eclipse sun of death and its death flare is the root cause for both the death and the lusterless vegetations in Farum Azula. But here comes the question again. Why are these effects only visible in a few areas of Farum Azula? If they were caused by an eclipse in the sky, then shouldn't the effects be everywhere? Well, that is true, but remember the angle or position of the obscured sun we just mentioned? Indeed, one possible explanation would be a matter of exposure to the eclipse sun. But you see, while the concrete mechanism of the eclipse sun is definitely worth exploring, what truly matters for now is the eclipse sun did tarnish the gold of the last cycle, evident in the lusterless sun, somber smithing stones, and the vegetations we mentioned. Moreover,
I do think this might be a little bit reductive, tying it all to the eclipse, when presumably Marika could drain Godfrey of his grace and his gold as well, so it doesn't seem like it's entirely just the power of the eclipse.
moreover, we have an even more important question to ask as well. The description of the rock heart mentions the eclipse happened during a sunset. Yet, judging by the obscured sun we now see in Farum Azula, the sun seems to be still at least a few hours away from setting. So, why? Have you noticed that there isn't really a day and night cycle in Farum Azula? Even if you pass time until nightfall, this obscured sun does not really set, and remains still no matter the hours. But rather than saying the place is frozen in time because everything is still moving about, it's more like Farum Azula is in a unique time capsule of its own, almost as if it was once under an imminent catastrophe and someone in charge hit the emergency button to stop the effect from fully taking place, which...
So, if the sun is toward the east and he's arguing at sunset, that means we are in the southern hemisphere of the lands between confirmed. Hey Gigantosaurus, nice to see you again. Wait, no, that wouldn't matter, would it? Because the sun always rises from the east, even if you're on the southern hemisphere. So the sun sets in the east in the lands between. Got it. Captini asks, did Marika drain him by exposure to the sun? Like, isn't there art where he's crucified? Maybe that was the draining? If you're talking about the depiction of him in the seeming Badlands or whatever in the intro, you might be able to make that argument, but that should have also happened when he was outside of the lands between, so you'd also be making the argument that she exposed all of the tarnished to the sun, and I don't know how compatible that is to the way that the crucified people throughout the lands between are silent during the day and start screaming at night. Zaro says, think about the position of Air Missoula. And that's like something I've also been considering as well. It's like we don't know when Fair Missoula crumbled, so even if we were able to come up with a concrete theory about how things are the way that they are, it might be arguable no matter what theory we come up with in relation to, did this happen pre-crumbling of Fair Missoula or post-crumbling of Fair Missoula? Chadwick said, Radon stops time with gravity. It isn't unreasonable that Fair Missoula is also a gravitational oddity. I would disagree that Radon stops time because Jaren says that you need to wait for the stars to align to begin the Radon festival. So whatever he's doing seems to be localized. True Connoisseur said, this really sits oddly with the Bale stuff. You're curious if that'll get tied in. Maybe. Wait, when was this made? Oh, crap. Where were we? Oh, no. Let me back up my stream to see where I was. My stream. So I was at the 35-minute mark. All right, this should be good enough.
Indeed, one possible explanation would be a matter of exposure to the eclipse sun. But you see, while the concrete mechanism of the eclipse sun is definitely worth exploring, what truly matters for now is the eclipse sun did tarnish the gold of the last cycle, evident in the lusterless sun, somber smithing stones, and the vegetations we mentioned. Moreover, we have an even more important question to ask as well. The description of the rock heart mentions the eclipse happened during a sunset. Yet, judging by the obscured sun we now see in Farum Azula, the sun seems to be still at least a few hours away from setting. So, why? Have you noticed that there isn't really a day and night cycle in Farum Azula? Even if you pass time until nightfall, this obscured sun does not really set, and remains still no matter the hours. But rather than saying the place is frozen in time because everything is still moving about, it's more like Farum Azula is in a unique time capsule of its own, almost as if it was once under an imminent catastrophe and someone in charge hit the emergency button to stop the effect from fully taking place, which allowed the city to go a few hours back in time before the sunsets occur. Indeed, when the eclipse sun of death occurred, the Dragon Lord Placidusax created a time capsule for Farum Azula, attempting to save the ancient royal city from its catastrophic effects, even though some of them have clearly already taken place. A time capsule where the time is just a few hours before the sunset, before the eclipse would occur. And how, you ask? You see, the Dragon Lord's seat is said to be at the heart of the storm that is beyond time, the storm that is at the center of Farum Azula. Meanwhile, the ancient dragon smithing stones, which is the scales of the Dragon Lord, can also twist time. In his boss fights, the Dragon Lord has various attacks where he would completely vanish and reappear at a different location, and this seems to imply that it's not just his seat or scales. He himself apparently also possesses the ability to warp through time and space, while his ability, from what we can see,
While I understand the crux of the argument, I don't know how fair that is, because you could probably say the same thing if you ignore the scale thing as like other teleporting bosses such as Radagon, which maybe that's a power of the Elden Lord, who knows. I guess that could be worth considering as well. But anyway, what else is gonna bring up? Oh, right, the whole like minor Erd tree seed thingy. I guess it's not a minor Erd tree, but I'll leave that alone for now. I'll make a note of it. Iman says, what about Margit? I actually couldn't remember if he fully teleports or not. I almost said Margit, to be fair.
only applies to himself.
Or like the Lamenter kind of teleports. I feel like somebody else tries to know Personella's kid. Anyway.
And not us, nor the environment. And granted, his arena reforming by going back in time could be due to the storm and not him. Yet, the Dragon Lord we now face is no doubt but a shadow of his former self. And with Farum Azula now indeed being in a time capsule of his own, and the Dragon Lord is the only one we know that is affiliated with time manipulation, then we
Man says some mages teleports like the ones in Kaled. There's also like the wandering noble type dudes that can teleport around, like the ones in the EG place, like the royal ruins or whatever they're called, are really annoying to deal with.
can safely assume that it is most likely the Dragon Lord's doing as well. And on top of that, we now also know why he needed to do it. Oh, if you're wondering about his god that was fled, we will know why it couldn't be her very soon. But for now, of course the time capsule didn't really save Farum Azula, as the ancient royal city has been crumbling ever since, and has lost a significant portion of its structures. Although its still sun is free from the eclipse, it remains ever obscured. And now, it is finally time to address the elephant in the room. Just where was the god of Placidusax, the god of the Sun Realm, in all of this? Or was the god even in any parts of this at all? I ask this question because the description of the Dragon Lord Remembrance reads, once his god was fled, the Lord continued to await his return, suggesting the god of the Elden Lord at one point simply left. Indeed, I said left instead of fled. You see, rather than fled, both the Japanese and Chinese version of the description simply says the god of the Elden Lord has left or departed. But
to be fair, the Japanese is so ambiguous as to what Saudi means that it could be interpreted as being driven out. So it's one of those cases where like the localization isn't wrong, but it doesn't necessarily keep the ambiguity present in the Japanese. So if he says left, that's fine. But unfortunately, left is also kind of a passive verb in English. So that makes it sound, I don't know, just there's like a different nuance there as well.
But not fled, nor do the description convey any sense of fleeing. Yet, whether the god fled or simply departed doesn't really affect this picture that I'm going to paint you, because the god might just have played a part in this catastrophe, if not concocted everything behind the shadow before it disappeared. A bold claim it is indeed, since the remembrance of the Dragon Lord is the only text where this god of the last cycle is mentioned. But with the discoveries we have made thus far on the parallels between the downfall of the two cycles, namely the release and manipulation of the Rune of Death, its manifestation and spreading in the realm and the Order, the half-curse mark left by both the Black Knife and the Fingerslayer Blade, and finally, the wandering mausoleum that existed since the prehistoric era, which served the same purpose. You see, we might just be getting close to discover what, or even who this god of the Dragon Lord really is. But to begin, we must first talk about the half-curse mark of death that is strangely also on the two fingers of Ranni, left by the Fingerslayer Blade. And to understand why the Fingerslayer Blade also left a half-wheel wound of the centipede, we must first understand why Ranni had to cast aside her Empyrean flesh. Curse mark carved into the discarded flesh of Ranni the Witch, also known as the half-wheel wound of the centipede. This curse mark was carved at the moment of death of the first demigod, and should have taken the shape of a circle. However, two demigods perished at the same time, breaking the curse mark into two half-wheels. Ranni was the first of the demigods whose flesh perished, while the Prince of Death perished in soul alone. So, the curse mark of death was supposed to take the shape of a circle, but instead it was split in half, with one half on Godwyn, who was slain by the Black Knives, and the other half on Ranni. But wait, Just how come the other half is on Rani? Was she also slain by a black knife? No, instead it was the rites that killed Rani. You see, the rites that imbued the black knives with the stolen rune of death was performed by Rani herself, and this rite is in fact designed to ensure the rite's performer is also killed when the victim is killed by the black knives. And that is why the description says Rani and Godwin perished at the same time. But why would the rites
I mean, a lot of this is just heavy speculation, but it's not framed as such, which is something that I actively dislike. No, not rice. I can't tell if you're being facetious or not, but rites, as in, special rituals.
performer kill themselves, you ask? Because the performer wants to discard their Empyrean flesh to avoid being controlled by the two fingers.
But I would not acquiesce to the two fingers. I stole the rune of death, slew mine own Empyrean flesh, casting it away. I would not be controlled by that thing. The two fingers and I have been cursing each other ever since, and the baleful shadows are their assassins.
Indeed, Rani would go so far as to discard her own flesh in order to avoid being controlled by her two fingers. And that is why the rite is intended to kill their performers in flesh, so that they can discard their own flesh and somehow be freed from the control. But here comes the question. Just why did the Finger Slayer blade also left a half-wheel curse mark on the two fingers slayed by Rani? Did Rani perform the rite again? Well, it is possible, since when we found Rani next to her dead two fingers, she is as usual in her doll form, and the rite is supposed to kill the performer in flesh alone, so that they can discard their flesh. But a doll is no flesh, meaning it can't really be killed in flesh. However, the answer is actually simpler than that. You see, the soul killing effect imbued by the rite is apparently non-exhaustible. And what makes me think so, you ask? Well, because other than Godwin, there are many other soulless demigods whose names we don't know, who are now resting in the wandering mausoleums. Since they are called soulless demigods, they have also perished in soul alone. And of course, that doesn't mean that the rite was repeatedly performed for the each slaying of the soulless demigods. No, once performed, the soul killing effect, as I said, remains constant and ensures the victim they kill only perish in soul. Hence, the many soulless demigods whose names we don't know. So no, Rani did not perform the rite again on the Finger Slayer blade, as she simply does not need to. Instead, the Finger Slayer blade has undergone the rites long ago in the prehistoric era by also an Empyrean, and for the exact same purpose, to cast away her Empyrean flesh so that they may welcome the reign of the Black Moon, to begin the Age of Stars. Indeed, the Empyreans in the last Elden Ring cycle are also Nox themselves, and naturally their god is also a Nox. Now, hear me out. As we have mentioned a lot earlier, the Black Knife Assassins are scions of the Eternal City. And according to the description of the Black Knifehood, they are rumored to be Newmen, who had ties with Marika herself. Meanwhile, the Newman's rune says that the Newmen are said to have come from outside the Lands Between, and are in fact of the same stock as Queen Marika herself. In other words, Marika are also Newmen, just like the Black Knife Assassins, and that is why they had close ties. And if the Black Knife Assassins, who are Newmen, are also the scions of the Eternal City, then what does that make of Marika? Indeed, Marika most likely is also a scion, a descendant of the Eternal City, a descendant of the Nox. Yet, hasn't the DLC told us that Marika came from the shaman village from the land of the Hornsent? Indeed, but that is because she and everyone in her village are the survivors of this ancient cataclysm that we are uncovering, or at least their descendants. Of course, as we have mentioned, the last Elden Ring cycle that is of the prehistoric era far predates the civilization of the Hornsents, while their roots and ancestors, again, certainly exist.
All right, so I'm glad that he's being very clear about the events that he thinks have happened and sort of at what time in the game they happened, because that might be important to trying to see how internally consistent this is as we continue on. So the big takeaway that I'm working with right now is that he believes the Nox stuff happened before America even left the shaman village. So that'll be relevant potentially when we try to look at the gloam-eyed queen and the rune of death stuff, if he does or does not think that relates to the Gek and all that. Indeed. Dark Souls 3 meme.
Existed then, the civilization of the Hornsents we now see, together with their Ballarets and near Ilum, only emerged ages, if not millennia, after the collapse of the Sun Realm. Indeed, the span of history of the lands between stretches over an astonishingly long period of time. And it is most likely due to the witnessing or the knowledge of this collapse that America knows exactly how to bring about the collapse of ours. After all, Newmen are long-lived but seldom born. But don't worry, we will get to this eventually. And for now, let us get back to the topic at hand and consider this.
Let us speak of the past a while. I was once an Imperial, of the demigods. Only I, Mikola, and Melania could claim that title. Each of us was chosen by our own two fingers, as a candidate to succeed Queen Marika, to become the new god of the coming age, which is when I received Blythe, in the form of a vassal tailored for an Imperial. But I would not acquiesce to the two fingers. I stole the rune of death.
You see, only an Empyrean chosen by the fingers can become a god, who is also the vessel of the Elden Ring. So Marika herself naturally is also an Empyrean chosen by the fingers. But now we know that Marika is also a descendant of the Eternal City, a Nox. So what does that make of the chosen Empyreans mentioned by Ranni, namely Mikola, Melania, and herself, who are all direct offspring of Marika? Correct. As the direct offsprings of Marika herself, they are also descendants of the Nox, by the blood of Marika. So every Empyreans mentioned thus far are descendants of the Nox. With this being the case, back in the last cycle, when the Nox were still vassals of the Sun Realm of the ancient dragons and their Elden Ring, what does that make of their Empyreans and even their god? Indeed.
Is he trying to say that the gloam-eyed queen must be an Empyrean Nox descendant lady because of the way Mikola, Melania, and Ranni's blood are coming through? Obviously, I'm jumping ahead a bit, but it's essentially what my mind is being drawn to. Stella, you're jealous of that lady's abs? Hey, Rooster Rick, nice to see you again. Gigantosaurus hates that the captions keeps referring to America as America. If you like the subtitle oddities, I would recommend checking out a Scottish YouTuber's videos and see how the auto subs fare for them. I know Smotown gets some bangers. Melina is Nox. It's true. I'm not so sure about this argumentation so far, at least at this point of the video. Rooster said, the fact that births have stopped always seemed like a clue to you, but perhaps it is simply an excuse not to involve children in this fantasy hellscape. Sorry, you're way behind, just noticed. Okay, it's fine. I don't know if you've caught up now or anything like that, but I will say that we're told that the Snake Men were born after Rykard fed himself to the serpent, which should be post-shattering, so there's presumably some forms of birth still going on. I almost said births going on, which is a different kind of a thing, which is in fact the antithesis of birth.
Indeed, the Empyreans and even the god of the Dragon Lord, the very vessel of the Elden Ring, were most likely also Nox themselves. Which brings us back to the point that the Finger Slayer Blade has undergone the same rite in the last cycle for the exact same purpose. It was also performed by an Empyrean to kill a vassal Fingers, to discard her flesh so that they may overthrow the reign of the sun with the reign of the Black Moon and begin the Age of Stars. Similarly, since we have discussed the Wandering Mausoleum have already existed back then, the killing of demigods with black knives must have also happened back then as well, and is the reason why these mausoleums were built, as the Nox were expecting an eclipse sun
What?
of the Black Moon and begin the Age of Stars. Similarly, since we have discussed the Wandering Mausoleum have already existed back then, the killing of demigods with black knives must have also happened back then as well.
I don't know how I feel about that one, Chief. My biggest issue with this kind of theory crafting right now is the fact that it kind of goes directly against some text, which, to be fair, I have some issues with the text of the game in general. Demigod. This is going to be a minute to find. Actually, first recorded. Oh, this is Roger's dialogue. So I should look up Godwin, I guess. On a bitter night, they murdered Godwin the Golden. That was the first recorded death of a demigod in all history, which is perfectly in line with the Japanese there. But anyway, that's not it. Not quite. Oh, wait, there we go. The epitaph, golden epitaph, says, "It's a sword made to commemorate the death of Godwin the Golden, first of the demigods to die." Now, you can try to rationalize this by saying that the demigods are specifically, in this context, supposed to refer to Marika and her ilk, which is kind of true based on Godric's Great Rune, stating that Godfrey and the Golden Bough were the first demigods, but it certainly sucks then that we're told of soulless demigods, which would then seemingly have no connection to Marika and her demigods. So either the text is inconsistent, which sucks and really throws a lot of wrenches into our interpretations here, or these dudes did not die before Godwin in a different cycle, which I think there's room to believe the latter more so than the former, I would hope. Gigantosaurus said, "Does that mean the Nox and the Black Knife Assassins want the Dark Moon ending?" Presumably, but then one of the questions becomes, why, if they're looking for a Lord of Night, do they oppose Ranni when she takes the Finger Slayer Blade? Because the silver tier description, one of them says that the Nox want a Lord of the Night, which is essentially what you are in Ranni's ending. Elden, I'm not sure if a comment got cut off, but you said, especially since we find similar corpses in the Shadowlands. That's actually a good point. Let me think about that. I guess we're not told if those corpses belong to demigods in the Shadowlands, but considering how they have the same model, it's very easy to make that inference. So that's a very good asterisk, but there might be a little bit of a wiggle room with that, unfortunately. Gigantosaurus said, "In the website, the Black Knife Assassins went after the other demigods after they killed Godwin." Yes, that is true as well. Which, it really does annoy me that you have that kind of pseudo-canonical information not contained within the game itself. Chadwick thinks conceptually that the silver tiers are also soulless demigods. You think Ranni was going a step further than the Nox? I would kind of have to disagree. Well, maybe a silver tier is a little bit different than a mimic tier. So maybe a mimic tier is a tier that gets a soul, but at the very least, when you summon the mimic tier, you're summoning its spirit, which uses the soul kanji. We've been having a discussion on this in the Discord. It's kind of really annoying, but my takeaway is that um, there doesn't seem to be enough of a distinction to say that spirit ashes don't contain souls of the victims who were cremated.
And it's the reason why these mausoleums were built, as the Nox were expecting an Eclipse sun drink of colors that would revive their soulless demigods and turn them into those who live in death. This, together with their killing by the Rune of Death, both corrupted the Elden Ring Order further. Now, let me ask you this. If the Nox committed high treason to overthrow the rule of the Elden Ring, meanwhile the god of the last cycle was most likely also a Nox, just like Marika, and is said to have departed or fled for unknown reason, how likely do you think that she was complicit in all this? By the way, you heard me right, I said she, maybe a few times now. You see, there is only one Empyrean we know of that we haven't mentioned, and this Empyrean also has the title of Queen. How coincidental. An Empyrean that is said to have once wielded the Rune of Death, just the thing the Nox needed. An Empyrean that also wields fire, which if you consider she was the god of the Sun Realm, a god of the Golden Sun, is a very fitting power. And, by the way, do you know that when a total solar eclipse occurs, the color of the sky would shift into a dark purple hue, as if twilight has come? But you see, the eclipse drained of colors, according to the description of the rock heart, happened during a sunset. But what the description doesn't mention is that, at that moment, twilight immediately came, due to the eclipse. And the word twilight, you see, has an archaic synonym that is gloam. Indeed, the gloam-eyed queen was once the god of the Sun Realm, the god of the last cycle, the previous vessel of the Elden Ring. Of course, it is never officially stated that the gloam-eyed queen was a Nox, or in any way related to the Eternal City. Simply claiming she was a Nox and even played a part in their treason would no doubt be too far a stretch. However, as we have discussed, all Empyrean existed are descendants of the Nox, while only Empyreans can become a god of the Greater Will and the vessel of the Elden Ring. So, if the gloam-eyed queen was an Empyrean chosen by the Fingers, chances are she was most likely also a Nox. And if she was a Nox and even played a part in their treason, then everything about her, including her Black Flame and her Godskin apostles, suddenly just makes sense. As the god of the sun, of course she wielded flame as her power, because flame is the power of the sun. Indeed, she wielded fire because she was the god of the Golden Sun, and it was the power that belonged to the very cornerstone of their rule. The Blade of Calling is the only piece of item whose description mentions the Golden Flame, and is a blade that belonged to Melina, who in the Frenzy Flame ending revealed her gloam-colored eye. But no, Melina is not the gloam-eyed queen, and we will get to know why very soon. But for now, the sigil of the Black Flame looks much like the head of Matter, the Mother of Fingers, and Matter is said to be the daughter of the Great.
Everybody always says that, and I understand why they say that based off of the visual design alone. And maybe this is part of the Japanese only thing, but the God Slayer sigil description, seal description says that it's supposed to depict a hand closing over it, which a hand is not a fingerprint. So I kind of don't like this interpretation for that reason. Let me look that up. Yeah, I mean, It's a black flame palm. Eh. I don't know, man.
The mother of fingers, and Matter is said to be the daughter of the Greater Will, and the very first shooting star landed in the lands between. Considering this, it is likely that it was Matter who chose the gloam-eyed queen to become a god of the golden sun, and granted her the power of the sun that was her flame. But you see, the black flame she wielded was not always black, and was in fact once golden. So how did the golden flame turn into black flame, you ask?
And while I think there is room for that interpretation, I just don't like how he sets this up so matter-of-factly when it is very debatable.
The gold of a flame was first tarnished together with the golden sun, but then it was transformed into red flame by her rune of death. Indeed, the black flame could once slay gods when the rune of death was still in possession of the gloam-eyed queen. But after she was defeated by Malekith with the rune sealed away, the true power of the flame was lost. But what the description doesn't mention is when the flame still had its true power, it was not black, but red. The true color of the flame imbued with the rune of death, the original color of the flame that killed gods. It has always made me wonder why the black flame would be described as weighty in the description of the black flame blade. But you see, another thing that is also described as weighty, or rather, leaden, is the full moon.
Honestly, I always looked at this as kind of a callback to Dark Souls, where darkness was weighty, and with the Rune of Death being the quote-unquote forbidden shadow, I don't think that's too far of a stretch, although it is a little bit too convenient at times, I think, to try and rely so much on the symbolism from the other games to justify things which may or may not be relevant in a different game, but, you know, that's just kind of how we do things sometimes. Elden says, Black Flame in DS3 was weighty, wasn't it? I don't think all Black Flame was, but it was definitely brought up that way in Dark Souls 1. Part of the reason why I'm reluctant to say so for Dark Souls 3 is because, like, Black Flame seemed to have been given more Frida properties. Let me try to look up some magics. Black Fire Orb. The Black Flame inflicts dark damage, striking targets with weighty force. And then I'm going to look at Dark Souls 1. Abyss sorceries are weighty and inflict physical damage. Perhaps human souls, because of their humanity, produce sorceries with more tangible presence. So I don't think that has to tie directly into Elden Ring stuff, but it's certainly what I think of. Black Flame equals humanity infused pyromancy. So that's right, guys. We're putting humanity back into the Rune of Death. Scal Easy says, you think the shift from physical to dark damage is also a design thing? Oh yeah, that's another weird thing with the Dark Souls stuff to consider, because in DS1, all the Black Flame did physical damage as opposed to fire, whereas in Elden Ring, Black Flame does fire damage, and I think Destined Death does holy, technically. Hey, Cor, nice to see you again. Alright. Yeah, so I've got a lot of thoughts about this, but I want him to kind of fully flesh out his point before I try to tear it apart to see if it's consistent or if it needs some more work.
Described as weighty, or rather, leaden, is the full moon. But of course, Rani's moon is not the black moon of the prehistoric era, which we will soon know why. But now...
And yeah, Black Flame isn't necessarily cold in Elden Ring, so I don't know how fair this is. But he is saying that the Black Moon is different from the Dark Moon, so maybe there's more to it.
We have uncovered that the black flame of the gloam-eyed queen was originally golden. Then the weightiness of her flame finally makes sense. Because her golden flame was tarnished and drained of color, by the eclipse sun, which was created by an ancient, weighty, leaden moon, the Black Moon. And by now, the mystery surrounding the Prince of Death's flame should be also resolved. Indeed, the Prince of Death referred to here is not Godwyn, but the Prince of Death of the last cycle, who was a Godwyn equivalent and direct offspring of the gloam-eyed queen when she was still the god of the sun. And naturally, as a demigod of the Sun Realm, the last Prince of Death, an ancient equivalent of Godwyn, also wielded flame, the power of their sun. And just like Godwyn, he too fell victim and became a Prince of Death, but was revived by the Eclipse together with the skeletal beastmen of Farum Azula, or the dead of the entire realm. They were revived by the Eclipse and were turned into Duskborn. Indeed, those who live in death are called Duskborn is because they were revived and granted a second life at the moment of dusk, which is a part of twilight. The twilight created by the eclipse that we have uncovered. And this eclipse sun of death of the last cycle is the very origin of the Duskborn. Moreover, it would be the Prince of Death's flame that sets the lusterless eclipse sun ablaze. But why would he help create this eclipse of death that required his own demise and even turned him into a Duskborn? You see,
I do think he might be taking... I don't even know if I could call this literal or figurative, this description. I feel like he's taking the lusterless sun, which may be a reference to the sun of the blade itself, as a reference to the sun in the sky, when I don't think that's kind of what it's supposed to mean. And this whole claim about the previous Prince of Death is completely insubstantiated, and I'm just kind of disappointed because, like, a lot of the other observations were really good and the thought processes leading up to them were really good, but this part just feels really out of left field, to me at least.
Intention or even agency in this matter, while worth exploring, doesn't really matter for now. What truly matters is the eclipse sun wasn't set ablaze by the gloam-eyed queen herself. In fact, the Imperial that used the Finger Slayer blade to discard her flesh for the Age of Stars also wasn't the gloam-eyed queen, but instead an ancient equivalent of Rani. However, this doesn't mean that the gloam-eyed queen wasn't part of the treason. Much like Marika, the gloam-eyed queen also worked in the shadow to ensure the collapse of the cycle. The truth that her king consort has been ignorant of, and is the reason why he obliviously waited for her return. Yet, it was she, the vessel of the Elden Ring, that provided a part of the ring, namely the Rune of Death for the Finger Slayer blade. But why would she do it if she was the god of the cycle, you ask? Well, if anything, her followers, the Godskin apostles, are the very proof that she despised the gold of the greater will. Even long after the Nox were banished, she and her apostles were still committed to prevent the rise of another Elden Ring cycle. By now, it should become clear that the brooches on the apostle sets are a sun embedded with a gloam-colored jewel, representing the gloam-eyed queen and the gloam or twilight she concocted, while the golden stitchwork sewn onto the robe is also a sun. The Godskin nobles are said to be the most...
I think that's an interesting observation, but if he's trying to say that there's gloam in the midst of the sun, does that not therefore imply that it's an eclipse? And then to say that the gloam-eyed queen simultaneously does and does not have a connection to the Black Moon, it feels like he's jumping around a bit. This doesn't mean that he's wrong for these observations per se, but it just doesn't feel super consistent to me, at least.
Ancient apostles. Their robe set, including the hood, has a total of 8 faces whose eyes bear the grace of gold. Meanwhile, the other Godskin apostle robe only has one face whose eyes, interestingly, doesn't bear any grace of gold. As if it was also stripped of the grace of gold, much like the tarnished. But
to be fair, the nobles participated in the god hunt, whereas it seems like the apostles were too young to do it. Truly the little brother since syndrome.
No, that face didn't belong to a tarnished, but was the skin of a demigod, or perhaps a minor demigod, much like those nameless ones of the wandering mausoleums. And no, it's not a demigod of our era, instead it was a minor demigod of the last cycle, whose grace of gold was tarnished along with the sun by the eclipse, along with the somber smithing stones and the vegetations in Farah Mazula. Indeed, the Godskin.
Oh yeah, I should probably quantify why I said the nobles participated in like the god hunts. It's because it comes from what's it called? Noble presence. Nobles are the most ancient apostles who are said to have assimilated inhuman physiology. Well, that's not right. Oh, so it's got to be god hunt, right? Stapealer or noble presence. So did I just not get the right thing? Once a sign of the god's wrath, this incantation became a trophy of the nobles' god hunt. So it's only the nobles who have this for some reason. So they hunted the gods, and presumably the apostles did not. So I guess it's not quite so black and white. That's a Black Flame joke reference, as I thought. Elden, you should have kept track of how many times he'd said "indeed" so far. Indeed. This catchphrase at this point, you like it? Okay. I'm gonna back it up.
And it was a minor demigod of the last cycle, whose grace of gold was tarnished along with the sun by the eclipse, along with the somber smithing stones and the vegetations in Farah Mazula. Indeed, the Godskin nobles are the most ancient of the apostles, because their origin traces back all the way to the last cycle that is of the prehistoric era. You see, the festival of Windmill Village, a festival of skinning, is a tradition so old that it was tolerated by the Earth Tree. But in fact, it is tolerated not only because it is old, but because it is so ancient that the original purpose of the festival has been lost to time. The original purpose, that is the skinning of demigods of the Sun Realm, the killing of his vassals in defiance of the rule that is in the name of the Greater Will. A festival originated with the Godskin nobles.
A lot of people talk about the festive grease, but I'm surprised at how few mention that when you use it, you get more runes for killing enemies. So I think it's more than just skinning the Godskin, or, you know, the slain demigods or whatnot. I think the idea is obtaining runes or gold from the dead, essentially. So it's like a harvest type festival grease to me, at least.
Faces on the Godskin noble robe still bear the grace of gold is because the trophies on their robe are demigods that were killed before the day of the eclipse, implying the skinning of demigods had existed even before the eclipse occurred, a seed of defiance and betrayal of the gloam-eyed queen that would later bloom. And if the nobles are followers of the gloam-eyed queen, who we now know was the god of the last cycle, and her followers were hunting and skinning demigods secretly in defiance of the Greater Will, then the motive of the gloam-eyed queen is therefore established. Indeed, as a Nox herself, she too despised the rule of gold, despite having been chosen to be its god. While we cannot say for certain that she desired the Age of Stars, she definitely has sufficient motive to be complicit in all this, if not concocted everything behind the shadow by providing her Rune of Death a part of her Elden Ring.
So I wonder if he's going to eventually get to the point that the gloam-eyed queen, who is dissatisfied with her order, essentially led to a pseudo shattering of the ring because she is America and America's doing it all over again.
And this brings up another elephant in the room. Just what did she do with the Elden Ring? Did she also shatter it like Marika did? Now, before we dive into this, we must first understand how she was able to simply leave or flee away. As we have discussed earlier, the god of Placidusax at one point fled or left the cycle behind.
You know, it'd be a fun idea if Marika is trapped in the tree by impenetrable thorns and you need fire to burn the tree. What if the Gek was trapped in the sun and you needed the moon to block the sun to free the Gek? That'd be kind of neat, I think. I don't know how well it works, but just an idea. Platinum Chip, you find the implication made by the Celebrant Skull Mace when it says the skull is too large to be human? You forgot a word? Demigod skull? So that's an interesting thought. I guess I'd never really thought about that description that way. My first knee-jerk reaction to be, well, in the past, humans are larger than they are now, according to the Giant Crusher. So maybe it means humans of today, but it's a good question. Gigantosaurus said, why did Marika defeat herself and give her own rune of death to her shadow? Hopefully they will explain that. But don't get me wrong, I think that's a possibility, despite the video, and it's something that I've considered as well, which is always a real pain in the ass trying to justify these kind of questions.
The god that we have now identified as the gloam-eyed queen. And now that we have discovered she was really involved in the treason of the Nox, the reason why she had to leave or get away also becomes apparent. Because you see, even though the Nox managed to create an eclipse of death with their black moon, their age of stars either did not remain for long, or perhaps didn't even begin at all. As what eventually followed was their banishment to the underground by different Astal who leveled their eternal cities with meteorites.
He leveled them after they were buried, but I digress. Hey, so Helanthropus, what civilization do I think was the first? A lot of people say different answers. I am unsure. I think that a lot of what the game peddles would be that the dragons came first, which, I mean, kind of makes sense, I guess. But there's too little info about both the Rao civilization and the Ul dynasty and the other dynasty whose name I always forget. That makes me wonder about them as well because, well, I think the Ul dynasty masonry is older when compared to like real life archaeological sites. The Rao civilization is so damn big and prolific that it seems like it should predate what little we know of the old stuff. So, yeah, man, I don't know. And that's true, like the old gods and the giants are also very well unknown. Rooster thinks that the giant faces in the side of the mountains are probably the ancient gods. I think that's the strongest possibility considering the size of the ancient meteoric or a great sword being the tip of an arrowhead.
But, you see, whether the different Astal were truly sent by the Greater Will as a punishment is a topic that is worth a video of its own. So rather than diving into that right now, all we need to know is that while the eclipse of the Nox was a catastrophe to the Sun Realm and its order, the meteorites of the different Astal were in comparison almost an apocalypse to the lands between. The locations of the three eternal cities that are now underground are beneath Leyndell, Caelid, and Liurnia of the Lakes, and most likely they were also once located in these same regions before they were banished to the underground. And these cities must have been way bigger in scale than they currently are. In the north of the lands between, the consecrated snowfield, while does not have an eternal city underneath, strangely does have the presence of Astal inside one of its caves. Meanwhile, Ordina Liturgical Town is clearly a town of Nox heritage, where the most amount of Black Knife assassins, the descendants of the Eternal City, can be found. Considering both, the civilization of the Nox might have once existed in the region before it was destroyed by Astal and became the barren snowfield we now see. Now, these three cities together with...
Yeah, a lot of that is speculation that I would take exception against.
With consecrated snowfield, they cover well over half of the area of the lands between, and if they were leveled to the ground by the meteorites of different Astal, then it must have caused immense devastation to the lands between as well.
That would be true if it was clear that Estelle did that above ground, but I would argue that the Japanese makes it a little bit clearer that Estelle is the byproduct of the Nox's despair, which to me suggests that they should have already been quote-unquote banished or destroyed underground by the Greater Will. So Zyro said that the dragons came from the Crucible, and that means the Hornsent were or are the equivalent of to the pygmies in Dark Souls. I would disagree with that on multiple fronts. We don't necessarily know if the dragons came from the Crucible, but I don't really want to get into that. I think it's an acceptable enough headcanon for an individual. However, saying that the Hornsent are the equivalent of the pygmies in Dark Souls, I don't think works very well when we have Hornsent researchers in their ghost form seeming to study the Rao ruins in archaeological fashions. So if the Hornsent have forgotten what the hell the Rao were doing, then I don't think it would be so fair to compare them to the pygmies, which are kind of a prehistory as far as like the Dark Souls universe goes. Chaddock said, "Do you guys want to start a GRRM harassment campaign and pester him into releasing his Elden Ring manuscript?" I mean, I have thought about like emailing him before, be like, "Yo, dog, what up, bro?" But I mean, I may as well shouldn't I? Like, no harm in asking. Other than if I ever did get exclusive access to information, how much extra attention it would bring me. Elden said, "It seems like one big meteor hit Farum according to the Ruins Greatsword." Oh, and you're thinking that he's probably going to mention that Estelle is what caused Farum Azula to be broken? Well, I guess he kind of already talked about there being multiple cities and that it was always in the sky. I don't know. Chadwick, you think it's under a heavy NDA? Probably. In real life, humans were called pygmies. Not all humans. It was a specific tribe in Africa, and I don't really know the situation surrounding it, but I do know that pygmy can kind of be seen as a slur when used in certain ways. So I always felt kind of awkward talking about like the furtive pygmy, but it's very clear from the context that it was like more of a game thing than anything beyond that. Chadwick says, "It's all there, guys. Figure it out." Quote, Germ. So Robert Jordan had a beautiful acronym for readers who liked to ask him questions about his novels. It was RAFO, RAFO. Read and find out. And he would reply that to questions that literally had no possible answers in his books, which I think is devilishly funny. Kind of like the way that Miyazaki said that he likes to take the pendant as a starting gift in Dark Souls 1 and people reading into it too much. Anyway, video time.
Yet, there was even more. You see, the Nox also lost their Black Moon. The Memory Stones are said to be made with the very fragments of the Black Moon, the Black Moon that once hung above the Eternal City. But just like how their cities were leveled by different Astal, their Black Moon must have also been destroyed either by meteorites or simply by the manipulation of gravity, something that Astal seems entirely capable of.
There is a really cool description in Shadow of the Erdtree that talks about a moon potentially falling on the town where there's the Cursed Blade Hornsent that's like in the very center of the map, essentially. Let me see if I can't find it. Oh, it's the linchpin stones. Linchpin stones are spiritual anchors said to hold the ground in place and quell the fury of earthquakes. When this one shattered, the surrounding town fell into the broken earth. One account claimed that the moon itself had come tumbling down. So part of me has wondered whether or not the moon, which allegedly came tumbling down, could be related to the Black Moon and or the banishment of the Nox. But if that's the case, it kind of sucks that we don't have a more direct tie between the Nox themselves and, what do you call it, the Eternal Cities in the Shadowlands. So I don't know what to do with this information. But I think I've shared this on the Discord before, but for anybody who's wondering about like the Shattered Stone Talisman and Linchpin Stones, it's kind of like what are they called? The America Stakes of America seem to be in the base game. So let's pull that up. If there's a Stake of America near where you died, oh, so that's the only time it shows up? Oh, that looks like a different kanji. But I've wondered if it's supposed to be the same thing and that like Marika as the goddess is kind of keeping the lands together. Yeah, that is different. Okay. America stakes only in the sharper image. Exactly. Hey, Doomfist, welcome back in. And Shiloh, nice to see both of you guys again. It's the Morthrumans. I will never remember that name.
To cause the Black Moon to come tumbling down, similar to what the Shattered Stone Talisman described. But no, the fallen moon mentioned here is likely not the Black Moon of the prehistoric era, but one of the twin moons of the Carian sisters that belongs to Relana. But this would be a story for another time. You see, all we need to know for now is that the Black Moon of the Nox was likely destroyed by Astal along with their cities. But whether it tumbled down or was destroyed in the sky, the moon or its shattered fragments must have fallen right back into the lands between. And its fragments would be found and made into memory stones later. Either case, the resulting devastation of the meteorites and tumbling or shattered moon must have been of an apocalyptic level, and may even have drastically altered the landscape of the lands between. Countless lives must have perished as a result. Now, with this being the case, the only sensible thing for the gloam-eyed queen to do would be simply flee or leave, so she could fight for another day with her apostles to continue to hunt down the demigods that might have survived the cataclysm, and of course, more importantly, to prevent another Empyrean chosen by the Fingers from starting another Elden Ring cycle in the name of the Greater Will.
Not that I entirely disagree with this as a possibility, but if this were true, like if this was all true, I would still be disappointed that the Gek is scared of some stupid space antlion with Estelles. And as the bearer of the Rune of Death and Death and allegedly the Elden Ring at that point, she could get got by some spooky skellibugs. I would be very remiss about that.
After the collapse of the Sun Realm, ages or even millennia would pass without the rule of
No, millennia doesn't get born. I'm joking.
the Elden Ring, until one day the gloam-eyed queen would find herself standing before another Empyrean chosen by the Fingers, except this time she would not be able to prevent the start of another cycle, and this Empyrean was Marika. The 2019 E3 Elden Ring trailer shows the process of Marika or Radagon shattering the Elden Ring. One particular shot is a slow motion close-up of Marika's hammer in Miststrike. And in this shot, we can clearly see the broken shards of the Elden Ring due to the hammering. Yet, what we can also clearly see are the golden threads attached to the hammer, and these threads are most likely also fragments of the Elden Ring. Indeed, the golden threads we saw Marika retrieved in the trailer were also the remnants of the Elden Ring. The Elden Ring of the Sun Realm, the Elden Ring that was shattered by the gloam-eyed queen. Even though the Nox were banished to the underground with their eternal cities leveled by different astral, the Sun Realm and the Cycle still inevitably collapsed, which is evident in the crumbling of Farum Azula, the abandoned Mother of Fingers, as well as the absence of his very god. And, as we have discussed, the gloam-eyed queen was likely complicit in his collapse, if not concocted everything in the shadow by providing her Rune of Death, a part of her Elden Ring. If she, the very god of the Sun Realm, desired his collapse, then what could better guarantee it than shattering the Elden Ring that she already possessed? Indeed, she too shattered the Elden Ring, likely immediately before or at the moment of the eclipse to maximize the damage and destruction to the Order. But even then, remnants of the ring, namely the golden thread, still remained inside her, while the Rune of Death, a part of the ring, was deliberately kept for the killing of future gods, so that she could prevent the coming of another Elden Ring cycle. With all this now laid bare before us, who then do you think the cadaver shown in the trailer belongs to? Indeed, it was the cadaver of the gloam-eyed queen, who
Indeed. All right, so this part is going kind of fast, and it's a little bit hard to keep track of all of his information, especially the parts that came earlier in the video. So I'm a little bit confused about what he felt about the Finger Slayer blade exactly. It sounded like he thought it was the body of a previous Rani, which was that of an Empyrean, and therefore isn't necessarily of a god like Marika/Radagon and the Sacred Relic blade, I guess, which I think that's fine. So, gloam-eyed queen leaves Placiduous Sax, does the Nox Eclipse stuff, but doesn't, and then comes back and does it. It's a little bit weird when he thinks the eclipse happened. And this might be a little bit of my fault in not keeping track as well as I should have here. So I'm going to listen to this part a little bit more closely. I'm going to go back pretty decent pace at this point. So Shiloh, congrats, you just got the Rakshasa set. What are you planning to do with that on your mission? Are you going to be doing a bunch of invades or whatnot? This is too complex. The Lord of the Frenzied Flame melt all the lore theories away. Okay, you guys want the Lord of Frenzied Flame? It's been a minute since I had him. I might not have it properly ready. There we go. I mean, hold on. I could fix this. I can fix this. There. The Lord of the Frenzied Flame is back. All right, Ask Next. Thanks for joining us. You have a good night. Oh, now you're on a mission to get the Death Knight set. That's a pretty cool set, too. Indeed. Midra? Okay. All right, so I backed up to the section before the one with the shattering to go back to the Fateful Collide and the Golden Threads. I don't think this is going to give me as much context as I want. I think there's just too much elsewhere. But anyway, I need to pay extra close attention.
countless lives must have perished as a result. Now, with this being the case, the only sensible thing for the gloam-eyed queen to do would be simply flee or leave, so she could fight for another day with her apostles to continue to hunt down the demigods that might have survived the cataclysm, and of course, more importantly, to prevent another Empyrean chosen by the Fingers from starting another Elden Ring cycle in the name of the Greater Will. After the collapse of the Sun Realm,
So she wants to prevent another cycle. But when does she want to do that? I'm going to back it up once more again.
countless lives must have perished as a result. Now, with this being the case, the only sensible thing for the gloam-eyed queen to do would be simply flee or leave, so she could fight for another day with her apostles to continue to hunt down the demigods that might have survived the cataclysm, and of course, more importantly,
So the cataclysm, by his definition, should be the eclipse. So the eclipse should happen, and then she runs away.
to prevent another Empyrean chosen by the Fingers from starting another Elden Ring cycle in the name of the Greater Will. After the collapse of the Sun Realm, ages or even millennia would pass without the rule of the Elden Ring, until one day the gloam-eyed queen would find herself standing before another Empyrean chosen by the Fingers, except this time she would not be able to prevent the start of another cycle. And this Empyrean was Marika.
I'm tracking, okay.
The 2019 E3 Elden Ring trailer shows the process of Marika or Radagon shattering the Elden Ring. One particular shot is a slow-motion close-up of Marika's hammer in Miststrike. And in this shot, we can clearly see the broken shards of the Elden Ring due to the hammering. Yet, what we can also clearly see are the golden threads attached to the hammer, and these threads are most likely also fragments of the Elden Ring. Indeed, the golden threads we saw Marika retrieved in the trailer were also the remnants of the Elden Ring. The Elden Ring of the Sun Realm, the Elden Ring that was shattered by the gloam-eyed Queen. Even though the Nox were banished to the underground with their eternal cities leveled by different Astral, the Sun Realm and the Cycle still inevitably collapsed, which is evident in the crumbling of Farum Azula, the abandoned Mother of Fingers, as well as the absence of his very god. And
Alright, so I'm fine with that. He's saying that there essentially was a shattering before Marika rolled up, and so Marika rolling up on the scene is kind of like the equivalent of our Tarnished rolling up on the scene at the start of the game, I guess.
And as we have discussed, the gloam-eyed Queen was likely complicit in his collapse, if not concocted everything in the shadow by providing her Rune of Death, a part of her Elden Ring. If she, the very god,
Hold on.
providing her Rune of Death in his collapse, if not concocted everything in the shadow by providing her Rune of Death, a part of her Elden Ring.
She provided her Rune of Death a part of her Elden Ring? I'm not sure what that means.
If she, the very god of the Sun Realm, desired its collapse, then what could better guarantee it than shattering the Elden Ring that she already possessed? Indeed, she too shattered the Elden Ring, likely immediately before or at the moment of the eclipse to maximize the damage and destruction to the Order.
Alright, so when the eclipse happened with Placidusax, she shattered the ring. Okay, I'm tracking. So the ring is shattered up until Marika rolls up, I guess.
But even then, remnants of the ring, namely the golden threads, still remained inside her, while the Rune of Death, a part.
Okay, so I'm starting to get it. So he's saying that the Gek is kind of like Marika at the end of the game, and Marika is like the Tarnished, and so I'm extrapolating here. Maybe Marika and Godfrey went on a quest to gather all the great runes, and then they messed up the Gek to instantiate their new order.
Of the rain was deliberately kept for the killing of future gods, so that she could prevent the coming of another Elden Ring cycle. With all this now laid bare before us, who then do you think the cadaver shown in the trailer belongs to? Indeed, it was the cadaver of the gloam-eyed Queen, who attempted to stop Marika from her ascension through the divine gateway of the Hornsent. But she was defeated by her shadow, Malekith, given to her by her two fingers the moment she was chosen. No, Marika initially did not have the Elden Ring for her ascension. In fact, while the legacy of gold is traceable, the ascension method of the Hornsent through the secret rite is something unique to their era and civilization, the divinity that is achieved through spirituality, which we will be deep diving into in my next video on the Hornsent. But for now, all we need to understand is that the Ascension method of the Hornsent doesn't require the Elden Ring, nor does it have anything to do with the name of the Greater Will. Yet, it was indeed a method through which Marika could ascend to divinity, as guided by the two fingers. And this alone would be reason sufficient enough for the gloam-eyed Queen, who despised the rule of gold and was committed to prevent the rise of another cycle, to stand before Marika. Indeed, she never truly left the lands between, but simply did not return to her king consort. But now,
So this brings up like a lot of questions. I don't really have too many problems with this theory, to be honest. It's just there's so much that's unanswered for, because if Marika is pulling out the Elden Ring or the remnants of it from the gloam-eyed queen legitimately in the Divine Gate area, then what connection does the gloam-eyed queen have to Beliarat and Anira Lim? And then what connection does Beliarat and Anira Lim then have to the Nox is completely unanswered. How come we don't see any like Godskin type stuff in Anira Lim? This isn't necessarily a problem with his theory as much as it is like the game at this point, to be honest.
Let's ask a question. Was it part of the plan of the Two Fingers to lure out the gloam-eyed queen, as they knew she still possessed the remnants of the Elden Ring, especially the Rune of Death? Well, this is possible, but what we can be certain, however, is Malekith somehow defeated her, and it worked right into the favor of Marika and the Two Fingers. Why, you ask? As now, not only was Marika able to acquire godhood, but she also possessed the gold of the Elden Ring to truly start another Elden Ring cycle. Indeed, with the remnants of the Elden Ring now acquired, Marika had exactly what was needed to create the Earth Tree, an equivalent of the Golden Sun, to truly start another Elden Ring cycle as a god of gold. And now, it's finally time to tie this up with my last video on the Ascension of Marika. As gold arose, so too was shadow born. With the remnants of the Elden Ring held up on high on the Divine Gateway, Marika not only achieved godhood, but also created the Earth Tree, the very cornerstone of her soon-to-come faith. And this, in turn, cast a shadow, the Shadow Tree, purposefully enshrouding the land of the Hornsent in shadow. But now comes the question. Remember, we have uncovered from the 2019 trailer that the golden threads are the remnants of the Elden Ring. If Marika ascended with remnants, how did she come to possess a complete Elden Ring that we know of that she would later also shatter?
To be fair, I guess you could say that the Tarnished doesn't have the full Elden Ring because we never get Miquella's Great Rune in the base game. So, or even if you do get the Miquella's Rune in the DLC, it's shattered and you don't really get the benediction back from his Two Fingers with Malenia's at their Divine Tower, the isolated Divine Tower. So, stuff's weird.
The best explanation would be there are indeed two different Elden Rings of two different cycles. In my last video on Marika's Ascension, I also suggested there exist two different Elden Rings, as Marika couldn't have ruled with the remnants of the ring. Some comments suggested that it is possible to modify the Elden Ring and change how it defines the world, which is implied by the different endings we can obtain through the different mending runes. While this is certainly true, it is important to point out that the modification by the mending runes are in every case as visually shown an addition to the existing Great Rune. Yet, what Marika retrieved in the trailer are broken threads of the last Elden Ring. So, even though the Elden Ring can be modified, it seems unlikely that the Elden Ring can be modified and transformed into threads, or even more unlikely for the threads to be modified or repaired back into a complete Elden Ring. In fact, the existence of two Elden Rings are strongly implied by the fact that the gloam-eyed queen was able to simply leave or flee away, without facing consequences. As after Marika shattered the Elden Ring, she was crucified and imprisoned inside the Earth Tree. And by whom?
So when he says there's two Elden Rings, I don't know if he means that there's like literally two copies of the Elden Ring, or if he's saying that by modifying, you're essentially getting a new Elden Ring, and therefore there are two versions of the Elden Ring itself. And if he's trying to say that there's two legitimate individual aspects of the Elden Ring that are distinct from one another, I would have to disagree with that based off of how we're told that the Golden Order began by plucking / removing the Rune of Death from the Elden Ring. So if Marika's coming up with a new ring, then you come up with the issue of saying that, hey, Marika essentially had the Rune of Death and plucked it out from her own ring, which is, you know, fine, I guess. But then you have all that oddities that arise with the gloam-eyed queen situation. So I am not a fan of the two Elden Ring theory, because then it brings up the consequences of how the rod interacts with both. So anyway, Forgotten Colton Williams, welcome into the stream. Have I heard of Scummage Infa? Yeah, I hate him. Sorry that he's your favorite. I absolutely hate the way that he approaches the lore, because he does it with all confidence and very little substantiation for his claims, and not as much textual support as I'd like, or qualifiers to be clear when he's saying what's his opinion versus what's actually in the game. And then Colton said, the Skidoo tree is the burnt corpse of the great tree which was once perfectly balanced, with two stalks in unison, one that governed life and one that governed death. America broke the natural way. I do think that America broke the natural way. I do see a lot of parallels between America and Gwyn, but my problem has always been like the internal consistency with the timeline of events relating to her ascension. And I'd like to know if she ascended at the outset of her reign with Godfrey, or if somehow that was delayed and she didn't truly become a god until the time of Radagon's ascension into Elden Lord, because we have that whole debacle to uncover with why go so far as to claim that Marika is the one true god, because if she was the one true god, that should be self-evident and everybody would like accept it unquestioningly. So the fact that it needed to be instituted as a kind of belief raises a lot of questions for me, amongst other things. All right, let's go back in.
You ask? By the Elden Beast.
All right, I'm going to actually back up to what he said right before the Elden Beast thing.
Consequences. As after Marika shattered the Elden Ring, she was crucified and imprisoned inside the Earth Tree. And by whom, you ask? By the Elden Beast. The Elden Star's description tells us that the Elden Beast, after its arrival by the Golden Shooting Star, became the Elden Ring. In other words, the Elden Beast is also the very ring itself. And now consider this. While Marika was crucified by the Elden Beast for shattering the ring, the gloam-eyed queen, on the other hand, caused a great cataclysm to her own order, while also, as we have concluded, shattered her Elden Ring. Yet, somehow she still managed to simply flee or leave, meaning she wasn't crucified or imprisoned as Marika was. Because of this, the last Elden Ring most...
And this goes back into like one of the earliest parts of the video where I talked about the ambiguity in Saudi, the Japanese verb, which means to leave. I guess I may as well pull that up on G-Show, because it could also be meant that she was forced to flee. So let's pull this up. So the verb "sado" means to leave or to go away or to pass, to elapse. It could be to be distant or to be sent away, to be driven off, or to divorce. Maybe the fact that it's Sari versus Sarita would be that she left on her own, but leaving on her own, well... Actually, I'm going to double check the way that like Roderica or Fia are sent away, because I'm pretty sure it uses it the same way, essentially. I'm in the wrong section of the thing. It's not good. What is this? Tree and beast. My dog is running in his sleep and his paws hitting the wall. It's distracting me. Oh no, that's not it. Okay. I guess it doesn't really come up as in other contexts like I was thinking. Anyway, so maybe it is really just fled as opposed to was fled. Yeah, okay. I'll leave that alone. All right, Robbie, have a good night. Colton, would you elaborate on what you meant right there about the symbol?
Most likely did not have the mechanism of the reign of our cycle, which is a reign that is also a living incarnation of order. Simply put, the gloam-eyed queen was able to get away because there wasn't an Elden beast to punish her for shattering the ring. And this implies the ring she had was a different one and not ours. Moreover, our Elden ring, which again is also the Elden beast, arrived by a golden shooting star. Meanwhile, the Mother of Fingers matter.
He's saying, I guess that would make sense. Let me listen to that again, though.
And this implies the ring she had was a different one and not ours. Moreover, our Elden ring, which again is also the Elden beast, arrived by a golden shooting star. Meanwhile, the Mother of Fingers matter is said to be the very first shooting star that landed in the lands between. Under this parallel, Matter, who is also the daughter of the Greater Will, likely bore the first ring when she landed. But of course, she herself is not the ring like the Elden Beast. Yet, it was she who chose the Nox that was the gloam-eyed queen and started the first Elden Ring cycle, that is the Sun Realm. And since the Elden Star is an Earth Tree incantation and is said to be the most ancient of those that derive from the Earth Tree, this implies the arrival of the beast or ring is tied to the creation of the Earth Tree. It is possible that the Elden Star landed soon after the Earth Tree was created by Marika, if not at the moment it was created. Which gave Marika a different and complete ring to establish the Order of Gold in the lands between once more. So, was Matter killed by the Finger Slayer blade? Well, as we have mentioned, the Finger Slayer blade left half a curse mark on the two fingers of Ranni. Meanwhile, there is no visible curse mark on Matter at all. Nevertheless, it is important to point out that we didn't really find Matter in the physical realm, but in a different dimension, much like the dream of Godwyn or the arena of the Elden Beast. However, even in Godwyn's dream, the soulless demigod, unlike Matter, was still incapacitated.
That is another thing that's been bothering me. He mentioned the first Prince of Death at one point and then kind of left it alone and didn't bring that up again. It just seemed to be convenient for the point when he brought it up. And so, is there another Prince of Death that was still active in the before times? Or, like, what happened with that situation? Setting that aside, I'm going to go back to the whole two Elden Ring topic, because on one hand, it's pretty easy to just kind of dismiss it because of the whole Rod situation. There might be a little bit more to it when we consider like what potentially happens with Mikola and his ring slash circlet. I'm sure that many of you in the chat already are aware that the term used for ring or circlet can be understood as ring, and it's a little bit ambiguous as to whether or not that references like an Elden Ring or something like that, because it's essentially supposed to be the basis for his coming order, I guess. So if Mikola rises to godhood, and we're told that godhood means becoming the vessel or the vision of the vessel of the Elden Ring, or the vessel of the vision of the Elden Ring, then how does Mikola rise to godhood? That is quite annoying, but we also have other potential gods and goddesses that aren't necessarily related to the Elden Ring, like Melania. Although maybe it's relevant that Melania is called a goddess, but Marika is just called a god. So, I don't know. And Doomfist says, yeah, don't forget the old gods. We had those guys as well, plus whomever the Godskins skinned. And of course, Occam's Onion believes that the demigods that were skinned were of an older order, which I don't know what to make of that.
Rather than deep diving into this topic that is worth a video of its own, what truly matters for now is matter was most likely not killed, but simply hurt or damaged, and was rendered broken ever since. But who the Fingerslayer blade truly killed was most likely a vessel Fingers. Much like the case of Marika, it must have chosen a Rani equivalent to succeed the gloam-eyed queen. And it would be this Rani equivalent who—
Hold on, I need to pay closer attention to this.
a vessel Fingers.
Much back it up further.
For now is matter was most likely not killed, but simply hurt or damaged, and was rendered broken ever since. But who the Fingerslayer blade truly killed was most likely a vessel Fingers. Much like the case of Marika, it must have chosen a Rani equivalent to succeed the gloam-eyed queen. And it would be this Rani equivalent who is also a Nox that attempted to start their Age of Stars with their Black Moon, while the gloam-eyed queen simply worked in the shadow. A repeat of what we have discussed, but making sure to tie this up even further. And back to the original topic, perhaps the Elden Beast is a defense mechanism of the new ring to prevent the betrayal of its very god? Whether or not this is the case,
So that part right there, I would be more in support of if we had like Mikola's own version of the Elden Beast that we fight. I think that would be super cool actually, rather than just promised consort Radahn. But because we don't have that with Mikola, that makes me a little bit more skeptical of this claim right here.
the order of the Elden Ring would—
And Gigantosaurus thinks that Mikola is supposed to take the Elden Ring from Marika after the boss fight with him. That's kind of my takeaway as well, but it really sucks that we never know what happens in any of the endings, and we can't even see what's going on with Mikola. I definitely know that there was a subset of the fan base that would have enjoyed working with Mikola, and a bit of morbid curiosity would have me curious to see what would go on with a quote-unquote Mikola ending as well.
very god. Whether or not this is the case, the order of the Elden Ring would collapse once more with the release of the Rune of Death, the killing of the demigods, and the shattering of the Elden Ring. An uncanny repeat of history, except this time in our era, the Age of Stars can truly begin. Though not the one that the Nox had hoped for.
I take it thou hast noticed. I shouldn't be surprised. I thought I might expound a little further upon the order I envision. Mine will be an order not of gold, but the stars and moon of the chill night.
I guess Ronnie's ending also brings in a huge wrench in the machine for the alleged 2 Elden Ring configuration theory, which there is part of me that likes that idea, but I just don't think it really works with the game, because if Ronnie can take the order with her, what's essentially stopping somebody else from coming up with their own Elden Ring and usurping Ronnie's order? So if the Gek made her order and then that got usurped by Marika, what's to stop that from happening to Ronnie again? So that's kind of why I think there needs to be continuity between the Elden Ring and the current order and whatnot. Gigantosaurus says, what if the Elden Ring is the actual quote-unquote god of the Dragon Lord, considering he looks dragon-like? I think that's a good question as well. And if you want to tie in that idea to the whole Eclipse thing or defeating Placidusax, then maybe that's how Placidusax's god could have been fled or left. Maybe they were detached, perhaps, when Placidusax sealed himself away in time. And that might also be why Placidusax's scales should canonically be able to kill the Elden Beast. It's really weird that Hugh's like, oh, you absolutely need this weapon that's capable of killing a god, and then you could beat it with a totally unupgraded weapon. I don't know, it's just kind of funny.
I would keep them far from the earth beneath our feet. As it is now, life and souls and order are bound tightly together. But I would have them at a great remove, and have the certainties of sight, emotion, faith, and touch all become impossibilities, which is why I would abandon this soil with mine order. Wouldst thou come to me even now, my one and only Lord?
But indeed, even when the ring was a living incarnation of the concept of order itself, history repeated all the same. As the rune of perfect order reads, the current imperfection of the Golden Order or instability of ideology can be blamed upon the fickleness of the gods no better than men. That is the fly in the ointment. But now we have learned this is true not just for the Golden Order, but also the last cycle that is the Sun Realm. After all, it is merely a cycle. Now, let's finish by solving the mystery.
And then, this is kind of a little bit of a cheap shot, but I would say if it's a cycle, then it should, in my opinion, necessitate a revolution of the same thing. Otherwise, it'd be an instantiation of a new order and wouldn't actually, like, cycle through. So that's why I don't think the two-ring theory works as well as it should, perhaps. Elden enthusiast, you're wondering if the Elden Beast looked different before the current Golden Order. Maybe he had horns. So I'll go ahead and turn it again to one of my favorite descriptions with protection of the Erdtree. In the beginning, everything was in opposition to the Erdtree, but through countless victories in war, it became the embodiment of order. So I think if the Erdtree wasn't the embodiment of order and the Erdtree is a byproduct of the Elden Ring, then the Elden Ring must have exerted much less power over the lands between in the past, and so it may have been slowly gaining more and more power through Marika and Godfrey sacrificing things in war to the roots of the Erdtree and funneling the gold of the dead, Festival Grease style, into the Elden Ring itself, essentially.
That we first started with, the mystery of Castle Sol and their origin. You see, it is interesting that the living beastmen of Farum Azula don't seem to be bothered by the Deathroot Grove even when they are in its vicinity. Similarly, the Wormface also strangely survived their death affliction, which would otherwise instantly kill us. Since they are all beings of the same cycle, perhaps they are all immortal beings, just like the ancient dragons. Speaking of
That's some interesting thoughts, but it also seems to be that Deathlight and Frenzied Flame canonically only affect the Tarnished the way that they do, so that might be relevant. I guess, like, Frenzied Flame can also technically kill spirits, but at the very least, we don't have a Roger Rabbit shoe scene with a spirit shoe being dipped into a vat of Frenzied Flame goo.
immortal beings, it is said that Commander Nile, the aging veteran general of Sol, who leads the spectral banished knights and exiled soldiers of Castle Sol, cannot die, nor did he have anywhere to fade away, unlike the Siege of the Sun that did. Indeed, the banished knights and the exiled soldiers, together with their veteran generals such as Niall and O'Neill, are all immortal beings just like the beastmen and ancient dragons. And they are immortal in the sense that they live eternal lives, which is why the aging Niall cannot die. But of course, just like the ancient dragon,
I was busy double checking some of the descriptions. Why did he say that? I'm going to back that up like 10 seconds.
the beast and they are immortal in the sense that they live eternal lives.
Wait, why?
Indeed, the banished knights and the exiled soldiers, together with their veteran generals such as Niall and O'Neill, are all immortal beings just like the beastmen and ancient dragons. And they are immortal in the sense that they live eternal lives, which is why the aging Niall cannot die. But of course, just like the ancient dragons, the beastmen and even the wormface, they can be killed. And it is worth mentioning.
I guess he doesn't say why they're immortal, so I wonder if he's going to tie it into the Rune of Death or grace and whatnot. And of course, the Miyazaki interview.
Mentioning that they, to some degree, are able to withstand element status as well, such as the living beastman unbothered by the Deathroot's growth, the wormface surviving his own death affliction, Commander O'Neill of Caelid unaffected by Scarlet Rot, and finally, the exiled soldiers of Stormvale withstanding the death blight spreading in the castle. But how are the exiled soldiers relevant here, you ask? Well, both the exiled soldiers and the banished knights have the color deep red specified in the description of their armors, a symbolic color of sorts it seems, and the same color as the sun symbol cape of the Skeletal Knight. Meanwhile, the giant tombstones where the Skeletal Knights can be found near is also in Castle Morn, led by Edgar, who is in Banished Knight's armor. And
now we also get them in the Shadow Realm. It's in like the Cerulean Coast area and stuff.
at the moan grave of Castle Morn is a neonine misbegotten that would drop the crafted blade greatsword, the storied sword and treasure of Castle Morn, whose description mentions a lone surviving champion from a country now vanished, and this country was most likely a country of soul. By now, it should be clear that the soul mentioned in the Eclipse Hotel is not Castle Soul, as Castle Soul has failed in their attempt to summon the Eclipse once more. Soul is most likely the name of the Sun Realm, what the prehistoric lands between was once called. And indeed, the banished knights, exiled soldiers, and the veteran generals of Soul, they are all of the same stock. They were all remnants of the last generals of Soul. They are.
Isn't it annoying that if the Castle Soul is supposed to be of the Sun Realm, that you've kind of got an Erd Tree depiction right here on it? Gotta love the consistency in buildings in Elden Ring and whatnot.
All of the same stock. They were all remnants of the last cycle who were once followers of the ancient dragons and their golden sun. But with their golden sun tarnished and their cycle collapsed, so did they lose their home and country. But considering the element resistance of these eternal beings, the skeletal beastmen are therefore corpses that have been revived by the eclipse rather than corrupted when they were alive. And they were revived together with the soulless demigods of their cycle.
So about those corpses being reconstructed from the eclipse, I don't think that works super well because they're still really weak to Litany of Proper Death. And Litany of Proper Death works specifically on those who live in death, which are byproducts of Deathroot, essentially. And we do have other forms of undead throughout the Lands Between which are not affected by Litany of Proper Death in that way. So, for example, the rotting corpses that you can find around Caelid and like the zombie boys that you can find in the river in Limgrave, those are all types of undead. You also have the Revenants, which are forms of undead, but they're obviously not the same as those who live in death. And in the past, there were those lost in death who may be different from those who live in death, but we don't really have active examples of those to test things against. Actually, now that I think about it, it would probably be interesting going to the catacombs in the DLC and testing Litany of Proper Death's effectiveness on the gaunt baby mage holder dudes, ladies, whatever they are. They got beards. So, moving on.
miracle that was witnessed by the veteran generals, banished knights, and exiled soldiers of Soul. Ages or even millennia later, as the demigods of gold were slain once more, the ancient Eclipse Sun and the resurrection they witnessed would inspire them to summon this Eclipse Sun for the soulless demigods of the Earth Tree, and strangely by the method of praying at that, which speaks to their desperation and the mystery of the Eclipse Sun all the more. But why are they serving the Golden Order now, you ask? Well, they had lost their Golden Sun and their home, the Sun Realm, long ago. But since they are eternal beings that live eternal lives, when the era of the Earth Tree began, when the gold of the Elden Ring would rule the realm once more, it is only natural that they would flock to his banner and follow Godfrey, the Lord of the Earth Tree. And that is why Stormveil is now home to the exiled soldiers and banished knights. Yet, when Godwyn the Golden and other nameless demigods of the Golden lineage were slain and became soulless demigods, some of them naturally followed their lineages in death and became specters. Yet, unlike the Mausoleum Knight and Soldier,
Oh yeah, and of course the Mausoleum Knights themselves, I'm pretty confident, don't get affected by Litany. Or at least, they're not like weak to it.
they do not need to sever their heads. A self-inflicted curse by invoking the death birds that ties their spirits to the land. In other words, a method to prevent the returning to the Earth Tree, so that they can continue to serve their soulless demigods in death until their revival. Yet, this doesn't concern the beings of Soul, the beings of last cycle, as they are not beings of the Earth Tree era. To them, there is no need for this self-inflicted curse. Led by Commander Nile, the followers of the Golden Lineage have found or come to occupy Castle Soul, and have been
So yeah, theorizing that the Banished Knights might be spirit forms with heads intact because they don't necessarily have to go to the Earth Tree is, I think, an interesting idea.
praying for the Eclipse Sun to occur again for the soulless demigods who they must have faithfully served throughout the era of the Earth Tree. But much like Placidusax, they are oblivious to the true design of the Eclipse Sun. It was neither a disaster by misfortune, nor was it a miracle that granted their prehistoric demigods a second life. Instead, it was the very harbinger of doom that brought about the collapse of their cycle. The fact that they would ever pray for an Eclipse Sun to occur again is both tragic and full of irony. And this is the full picture and story of the Eclipse Sun of Soul. Or is it? As I've mentioned, the collapse of the Sun Realm, including the meteorites of different Astol and the destruction of the Black Moon, must have wrought great havoc to the lands between. A 9-apocalyptic cataclysm in which countless lives must have perished. Yet, the fall of one era would kindle the rise of another. With devastation and death comes suffering and desperation. The vacuum of power left by the collapse of the Elden Ring cycle would create footholds for the influence and worshipping of the outer gods and the stars once more. Yet, it would also be an era where new life grows from death.
Hey guys, we've got outer gods. That can go on the lore bingo, and there might have been some other things to add. Oop. Oh, he did talk about gloam-eyed, but maybe not eyes in the exact same sense, I don't think. Melina eye did kind of come up. I should probably reduce the eyes thing. Melina eye plus eyes plus Gek, that's all essentially the same. Yeah, because if I click this, then I have to click this. That's kind of... I should revise this. I don't really think the Crucible came up properly. We have not gotten to one body theory. Merrick is... Actually, we kind of really haven't had that. Previous games? No. I think we're good. Okay.
And from death, one obtains power. And because of this, ages or even millennia later, at the very center of the lands between where somehow all death would gather, Here would arise a great civilization flourished with the power obtained from death, the power that is the spirituality of the Hornsent, the power of the Crucible. Indeed, in the next video, we will be deep diving into the mystery surrounding the civilization of the Hornsent, as well as their Crucible, together with the rise of the Outer God.
Ladies and gents, we got him. Crucible.
God's influence and the worshipping after the collapse of the Sun Realm. And you see, the giants are no doubt one of the most ancient species of the lands between, who most definitely has also existed and played their part in the Sun Realm of the prehistoric era. And it would be no coincidence that they would come to worship the fell god whose nature is so close to the sun itself, which we will hopefully also be addressing in the next video. And finally, I mentioned that Marika is most likely also a descendant of the Eternal City.
I'm going to count that. I probably should have counted that earlier, but I guess I forgot that context. America is a descendant of the Eternal City. That works for me. I was thinking about putting in the archaeology thing because he did talk about the ruin fragments, but I feel like that's a little bit different than what I meant by archaeology.
Nox herself. This implies that the shamans, a unique group of people under the civilization of the Hornsent, are also descendants of the Nox, the survivors of the collapse. After all, Newmen such as Marika and the Black Knife Assassins are long-lived but seldom born. It could be due to Marika having the knowledge or even witnessing this prehistoric collapse that she knew exactly how to bring about the collapse of our Earth Tree cycle, of which we will try to paint the full picture in the future as well. And under the rule of the Hornsent, the Nox, who are now called shamans, have resorted to a primitive living style, partially because the refined culture of the Nox has long been destroyed on the surface, but most likely, it was to hide any ties to an ancient civilization that was behind the great destruction of the realm ages or even millennia ago, which the Hornsent may have also remembered from one of their sagas. But perhaps there are other reasons as well. Nevertheless, the shamans would still be resented and oppressed by the Hornsents all the same. Yet, it would also be this very resentment and oppression that gave birth to the seduction of gold and the coming of a new god of another Elden Ring cycle. Thank you for watching this till the very end, and to those of you that have subscribed since my last and first video, sorry that this video has taken so long. As you can probably tell by the length of the video, the scope actually went way over what I first had in mind, and unfortunately, I'm only a one-man team that can only work on this outside of my 9 to 5. But I sincerely hope that you have enjoyed the video even if you disagreed with some of the ideas. Since now that Elden Ring is officially finished with the DLC dropped, other than just theories, I also want my video to let you guys, myself included, to experience again what Elden Ring has offered us. So a lot of time and efforts are put into the shooting, selection of clips and soundtracks as well. And if you like what I'm doing, consider liking the video and subscribing to my channel, and if possible, consider becoming a member as an onion in a pickle to support this channel as well. And of course, let me know if you have any questions or thoughts on the video in the comments below. Sharing the video would also be greatly appreciated. Thank you for watching again. This is Occam's Onion, and I'll see you
This is Amzanan.
soon.
Alright, so I do think the second half of the video was weaker, but that's also because it was predicated on some premises which I kind of disagreed with from the outset, which is just kind of the nature of being able to rely on the Japanese text, whereas not everybody can do that, for some further clarification of that as well. So anyway, despite all of my kind of grievances, I really did enjoy some of the thought processes that he went through in crafting his theories and kind of addressing some counterpoints as he was going through. That is the kind of methodology that I really enjoy. However, I was not always as happy with the framing of his information, which I think could use some improvement. But nonetheless, I still did enjoy this video quite a bit, and I went ahead and liked it, and I'm already subscribed to his channel. So if you guys want to support Occam's Onion as well, here is the link in chat for you to do so with that. Now, before ending things, I did want to go over some of my notes throughout the video. And so some of these happened so long ago, the context might be a little bit forgotten at this point. But the first thing that I wanted to touch on was how Fair Missoula has Deathroot, which I think is kind of problematic, but can potentially be hand-waved away by saying, like, maybe it came from Malekith. So I really appreciated him pointing out, well, Malekith doesn't really have Deathroot around him in either the Bestial Sanctum or the Fair Missoulan Inner Sanctum either, which is very well true. And the other thing I wanted to bring up in relation to that is that in Fair Missoula, there are also... it's just one spot, maybe there's two spots where you can get not minor Erdtree seeds. You can just get Erdtree seeds from the illusory trees there, which is interesting. So maybe Fair Missoula got launched into the sky after the shattering, or maybe when the Erdtree exploded, it shot out a bunch of seeds, Dragon Ball Z style, and one of them just happened to land in Fair Missoula. So if that's the case, we still have that whole oddity of trying to always suggest that Fair Missoula is completely out of time, because if that's true, then how the hell did that seed get there if Fair Missoula is truly segregated from the rest of the lands between? So maybe somebody else planted it after the fact. Bernal does show up, but I don't know. I'm a little bit skeptical about that. So going back to the gloam-eyed queen and ideas of the Newman, the shaman, holiness, and hornsent jarring, if the Newman were of Nox descent and they were the Imperial gods of the previous realm, essentially, then you need to do a lot of work justifying why the gloam-eyed queen would show up in near a limb, and for the hornsent to be okay with essentially flagellating the hell out of the Newman Nox overlords of the previous era that may have had a stronger Crucible connection than the Hornsent did, other than Hornsent racism because perhaps the Nox lacked horns, I guess. Maybe that's the reason, but well, I think that's a very interesting idea. There's not enough that we know about the Hornsent that makes me feel terribly comfortable with them being okay with flagellating the old gods, because I don't really see like a ton of past conflict with them, and with their deliberate researching of the Rao dynasties, it's like, why are they doing more Rao stuff than doing more Sun stuff? That doesn't really add up to me as well as I'd like as well. What I make of the Sun being in Fair Missoula 24/7, I think it's very interesting. I do think that there's a strong case to be made that if Fair Missoula wasn't like actually the seat of the Sun Realm, that it was still part of the Sun Realm. And there is also that connection to tie the Sun being existent 24/7 in the realm of shadow to consider as well. So I'm not trying to say that there are no connections between Fair Missoula and Anir Elim. It's just the Hornsent Beastman divide is one that's pretty hard to bridge, other than like divine beasts, which seem completely separate from what's going on in Fair Missoula. When the beasts of Fair Missoula venerated the dragons, why are the Hornsent so dumb as to not venerate the dragons themselves, especially when dragons should have still been a thing even in like the age the Hornsent were in prominence, because we still have land sacks, we have Fortisax essentially back in the day, Senisax, who is by Baal, and in a lesser extent you have Baal and the Drakes. So dragons I think would still be a big deal, but the Hornsent literally don't care and revere beasts instead. So maybe this could be a case of mistaking the finger pointing to the moon for being the way to enlightenment, rather than looking at the moon as the goal to begin with. But we just don't have a lot of text to extrapolate that kind of a conclusion from, I think. And then toward the end of the video, he was talking about how the Banished Knights were vassals of the Sun Realm. I don't disagree with that. I think that's a very strong possibility as well. I don't really mind that he didn't notice the Sarash depiction on the rallying standard and stuff, because it took me an extremely long time to notice. But setting all that aside, if we could agree that the Banished Knights were vassals of the Sun Realm, then I would argue we need to come into awareness that the Stormlord should also therefore be associated with the Sun Realm, and then try to fit together how the Storm Realm or Storm King pertains to both the Sun Realm and the Gloam-eyed Queen and Placidusax and all that kind of thing. And of course, if you think Placidusax is the Stormlord, maybe there isn't necessarily a contradiction. But with Anira Lim, going back to that stuff, kind of being centered on Gravebirds and therefore Deathbirds, it seems like there should be a stronger twin bird connection, which may be present in Faerie Missoula based off of like the reliefs on top of like the doorways and stuff, potentially depicting a two-necked bird or two birds facing away from each other. I don't know. Elden thinks that the Hornsent's tendency to worship transcendentalism makes them ignore what's already there with the dragons, like what I said with the finger pointing to the moon. Okay. And so the other thing that I wanted to touch on would be the Gloam-eyed Queen's connection to the Crucible. There is a little bit of a hint with that, with how the nobles are said to have been infused with inhuman physiology, and they are not unlike the Crucible or something along those lines. They even resemble the Crucible, I think is how the Japanese phrases it. So should the Gloam-eyed Queen be more Crucible coded than she is, or should Black Flame be more Crucible coded than it is, if she's related to the Sun Realm and the Hornsent praised the Sun and Crucible, I guess. I don't know. So there are tiny bits and pieces to like tie some of these thoughts together. It's just none of it is ever truly conclusive enough to make me feel super comfortable positing one thing over another. Elden says, quote, not unlike the Crucible, the primordial form of the Erdtree. Sounds close enough, and if it's a little bit different, then it seems to be like negligibly so, at least in this context. So, yeah, despite all that, I did enjoy the video quite a bit, and it kind of encourages me to make my own video a little bit sooner, looking at all of this stuff that we've been looking at. So, anyway, I just want to remind you all tomorrow that we're going to be doing something a little bit different with the format of the stream, because we'll be having Elden Dork on to have an interview / discussion about FromSoft lore, content creation, and my evisceration of his video from the other night about Muriel revealing the secret of Kaitha being Velka being Radagon in Elden Ring. So that'll begin at the normal time of 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm assuming that we'll be able to make it all 3 hours, and we might go overtime, but if not, I just also want to give you guys a bit of a heads up about that. So hopefully I'll see you all then, and yeah, thanks for joining and tuning in tonight. Hopefully we'll catch you on the next one. So, until then, take care, stay safe. Last Protagonist out.